2 p.m. and we're at a hearing for the Committee on Civil Rights and Immigration Advancement. This is docket number 0324, Civil Rights and Liberties of Returning Citizens, in order for a hearing on the reentry into our Boston communities. This docket is sponsored by myself, Councilor at Large Rupert Saunders, and Councilor Brian Worrell, who represents District 4. I want to thank our City Council staff, Ron Cobb and Kerry Jordan, for helping us out today. I want to welcome everyone here. In accordance with Chapter 20 of the Acts of 2021, modifying certain requirements of the open meeting law and relieving public bodies of certain requirements, including the requirement that public bodies conduct its meetings in a public place that is open and physically accessible to the public. The City Council will be conducting this hearing in person and virtually, and it is being recorded and live streamed. The public may watch this hearing at www.boston.gov/city-council-TV and on Xfinity 8 RCN or Verizon 964. It will also be rebroadcasted at a later date. If interested in participating virtually, please email ron.cobb, ron.cobb @boston.gov to receive the link. Written comments may be sent to the committee email at ccc.civilrights@boston.gov and will be made part of the record and available to all councilors. Public testimony will be taken at the end of this hearing. I want to thank members of the administration for joining. Dr. Rufus, Senior Advisor to the Mayor, Robert Turner, Program Coordinator in the Mayor's Office of Returning Citizens, and also Rupert Saunders, Placement Specialist and Digital Intake Coordinator at the Mayor's Office of Returning Citizens. As I said, my name is Ruth C. Louis-Jean. I'm chair of the Civil Rights Committee. I'm really excited to be having this conversation today around how we can support formerly incarcerated residents, reintegrate back into our city. I'm here as a lawyer who's represented folks in the civil process, but a lot of whom have had, have been part of our criminal legal system. And as a Black woman who grew up in Mattapan, I've had loved ones who have unfortunately been dragged into our very carceral state. It's often too easy to look at and blame personal failures when one of the biggest issues we have around our carceral system are the structural policy failures that often rob people of choice and ability to avoid the system altogether. We know some of the stats that we have 3,000 returning citizens in Boston every year, predominantly Black and brown, from low-income communities, from communities that have been disinvested in. One of the greatest forms of violence ever perpetrated against Black people in the form of slavery, and somehow we've allowed society and white supremacy often to paint us as folks predisposed to violence, when we know it's actually the system and so many of the structures that have caused high levels of interaction with our criminal legal system. Here at the city level, we have an opportunity to ease the transition home for many of our residents, to help folks on the road to healing and to help people renew. Formerly incarcerated residents are leading the way and not just talking about the service deficiencies, but also creating those necessary services. Whether that be folks like Leslie Creedle at Justice for Housing, Donnie Watson, Crossroads Consulting, a lot of great folks that we have here today, Andrea James, who's here from Families for Justice Healing. There are so many folks in community, many of whom are themselves formerly incarcerated, who are really leading the way on what justice looks like for formerly incarcerated folks. As I stated before, we live in a carceral state. The United States today has the highest incarceration rate of any country. The size of the American criminal legal system is not only unparalleled, but it is also deeply racist. African Americans, Latinos, and Indigenous people continue to be overrepresented in our jails and prisons in numbers dramatically disproportionate to their representation in the population. The long and deeply racist history of the American criminal legal system demands that we take action to right those wrongs, of not only the past, but of the present. That means investing in our communities, and that includes investing in those returning home from behind the wall. Invest in their recovery, invest in their economic success, invest in housing stability, and invest in access to basic things like access to vital documents. So I'm happy to everyone for being here. I'm gonna pass it off to my fellow colleague, co-sponsor, Councilor Worrell, but before we do, I wanna just say that in the city's current budget, there's a $1.28 million investment in the Office of Returning Citizens. That's a dramatic increase from what was really only just staff capacity at about 330,000. So I want to give credit where the credit's due to sort of meeting part of the moment there, but we have a long way to go. I don't want to undersell how incredible it is, but we have a budgetary process and one that is becoming more inclusive of the city council and of our residents in total. And almost all of the city council members, all of the newly elected ones, committed to a community process that would commit $1.9 million to the Office of Recovering Citizens. Not only to fund the office to this tune, but to also think about funding community grants so that we are in deep, deep partnership. This work does not happen. This work actually, it starts in community, and we're just trying to catch up here at the city level. So we need to do these investments. We need to and can do a lot more by our formerly incarcerated residents, and we also must be judicious stewards of our resources here at the city level. That means making sure that our budget reflects what we value, and if we see that we value those who are most vulnerable, who have been historically excluded, and who have been structurally excluded, it's time for us to right those wrongs. So I'm happy to everyone for being here. This is just the beginning of the conversation. That we have a long way to go, but I believe working together we can do good by a lot of folks who deserve to have their needs met. So, Councilor Worrell.
Thank you, Councilor Louis Jen, and thank you to the panelists here. This issue, I've seen a lot of my friends and families go through, and it's a roller coaster ride, right? They get excited that they're coming home, and then once they come home, they see the lack of support that's there for them. Whether it's not enough of the streamline of the processes to get basic paperwork in order to start their job search or the housing search. And even when they're looking for housing and that stability in housing, the leases, right? The leases or the size of the homes don't allow it. And what I want to see here is similar to what Councilor Louis Jen says, make sure that we change the structure in our system so we're producing the outcomes that we want to see with our community, with our returning citizens. Because I truly believe that everyone deserves a second chance, and it's always going to take a village. So I'm glad to see this village in this room here today that are taking this issue seriously. It's about stability, it's about streamlining the process, and it's about also engaging individuals earlier in that process. So thank you, Councilor Louis Jen.
Thank you, Councilor Worrell. I'll now pass it off to my council colleague, Councilor Bach, for any opening statements.
Sure. Thank you so much, and thank you especially to the sponsors. It's so exciting to have both Councilor Louis Jen and Councilor Worrell on the body, and I think that this is an issue that it needs the council's attention and continued advocacy, and we've got some amazing new advocates on the council. So excited about that and grateful for your guys' leadership. I mainly just wanted to shout out the GBIO folks I see in the back. Yes, which is such as folks know, a crew that I come from. I think this is exactly the type of thing that the GBIO community does best, which is to put an ask out there on the table in the fall and say, hey, we want 1.9 million for this office? And as Councilor Louis Jen just acknowledged, like what's already in the budget proposed for, like, that came out last week is a huge step in that direction. It's a quadrupling of the office. And at the same time, I'm sure you all are here in the audience because you want to get all the way to that 1.9 number, and April's a starting point in our process. So, for me, I think that when you think about returning citizens, they really are the test of like how our society is working. I think that in so many ways, what we do is we kind of like strip everything away from folks who come out of prison, and then we sort of, I think as a society, too often look at their subsequent circumstances, look at recidivism and say, gee, why couldn't you do better? And I just think that so many of the assets of our community, especially when you think about how many young people get involved in the carceral system, they're sort of like locked up, both literally and figuratively, like in this world. And I would love to see the city do a much more robust, muscular job of getting folks real opportunities and access. And I just think that the positive knock-on effects to our communities would be profound. One of the things we talked about at a hearing a few weeks ago was the real focus on returning citizens that we're going to have in this Green Jobs program that the city is launching. And I think it's really important that when we talk about returning citizens, we talk not only about the office, but also about the whole ways in which we can make our city, our economy, our social programs, everything that we do just more kind of open to the possibility of a fresh start for folks. And so I'm excited about that and the idea that we can focus that kind of climate core work in lifting up this community as well. But I think we all know in the city that you need to have like staff focused on something and thinking about it every day to really move the ball down the field. And so I'm excited to hear about the work that ORC is doing. I've been honored to speak to the office a few times and be aware of some of the work, but I feel like you do transformative work, and we could enable you to do so much more. So really delighted to be here today, and again, grateful to the sponsors.
Thank you, Councilor Bach. Appreciate your support and your being here. I'm now going to turn it over to the administration. I hear you all have a presentation and some things to share with us. So going to turn it over to Dr. Rufus Falk.
Thank you, Councilor. First and foremost, it's an honor to be here for this timely, pivotal, and very important conversation. I think it's a few years late, but better late than never. I first moved into this role in May of 2019, and this has been a fight I've been trying to fight daily to ensure that this population, these communities that we serve that oftentimes get not only have been divested, but have been intentionally, structurally omitted from the process, are at the foot of the table, at the beginning of the conversations versus receiving the crumbs and being impacted by policy by happenstance. There needs to be a level of intentionality around providing services, resources, and supports for this population. So this conversation is timely, but I feel like it's just a start. So I just want to make sure I introduce my colleagues, Robert Turner and Rupert Saunders, for the Herculean efforts that they provide for. I think once the office was announced, the expectations were never met by the capacity. So what the office was sold as was never was built with the resources or the capacity to fulfill the narrative that was produced out there. And in spite of that, these two gentlemen have done some amazing work. They've been cutting down trees with plastic knives, and I think now is an opportunity for us to get to some chainsaws to do some real work. So that's just some of my opening. But just to echo some of the sentiments that you both made, I wear a city hat, but I'm a kid born and raised in Roxbury. I'm a kid who, entire friend group, I think about my 12 and under basketball team, I'm the only one who didn't go to prison. So in saying that, we recognize how fragile your experience in childhood could be and how that can impact your trajectory into life. And unfortunately, when many of our brothers and sisters are returning, they still wear that scarlet letter when we ask them to begin this path of reintegration in society. Systems have made that so much more difficult than it has to be. So as a city, we've been trying to streamline this process, and I think this budget is a good starting point where we're talking about increasing capacity in terms of staff, but most importantly, increasing their ability to fill in some of the gaps that exist. So we've had gaps dealing with everything from IDs, dealing with larger asks like emergency housing. So some of the asks that we've made in this budget to ensure that this current staff and the existing staff coming in will be able to fill in some of those gaps, but also recognizing that the city can't do everything. The city plays a vital role, and I think part of this conversation is figure out exactly what the role that the city should be playing, because there is a larger network of individuals and institutions that are part of this process as well. We have our community partners, but we also have state and federal partners who have to step up and be a more integral part into this reentry process. So some of the work that we've also been doing is making sure that we're fortifying and solidifying some relationships with our state partners in the Department of Corrections, because much of this work where we talk about these IDs can be remedied in that DOC space. When we have individuals who are reentering society, making sure that they're actually leaving with those documentations versus showing up to the returning citizens office, needing that work, and that's just one more step for us before we can even make a referral for unemployment or some of these other essential services. So not only are we trying to beef up the office, we're trying to show that we're solidifying some of these external partnerships that are so vital. Before you have a report, and this report was put together in 2021. And for those of you in the crowd that don't have a report, we can make sure that it's public. If you speak, and send this to you as well. But what this report encapsulates is some of the work that ORC is currently doing, some of the work that's happening nationally in some other offices of returning citizens, whether it be DC or in Houston, some of the work that they're doing, and then trying to figure out exactly what is the role that we want our Office of Returning Citizens to play, services that we should be prioritizing, populations that we should be prioritizing and ensuring that we are filling those gaps and doing our due diligence to make sure that we're not leaving folks oftentimes in the lurch. I think oftentimes I come across folks who either have never heard about the office or have returned but haven't received the level of support that they should have. And I'm not talking about from the office, just talking about in general, because I think part of this conversation that we also have to have is that we talk about the city in the macro sense, making second chances a real thing. And that's even discussing the narrative around individuals who are returning and who's really worthy of a second chance. And that doesn't start in City Hall, that starts in our neighborhoods, and how do we support those individuals who are leading those conversations and say that if we're really talking about second chances, it has to be something that's from the grassroots and something that's on a community level, neighborhood level, where we are open to supporting and openly ensuring that we are bringing folks back into a place where they can be self-sustaining and productive adults. So I don't want to bore you with this report. The report gets into everything from having a tiered response to way in which we are delivering services. It gets into expanding some of this work to the Department of Youth Services, which I think that juvenile population oftentimes gets left out when we're talking about actually returning and having a reentry plan, because oftentimes GYS is just a precursor to state prison. And unfortunately, we have too many folks who started their incarceration stints at Department of Youth Services and just ended up graduating to the federal and state pen. So we wanted to make sure that we have a consistent presence in that space as well. And then also that we are putting more emphasis and having some more substantive conversation with some of these other employers to ensure that you can't just say that you're quote-unquote Corey friendly. What does that actually mean? How are you actually helping to assist individuals getting back into the employment market? So I know you posed a few questions. I don't know if you want to get into those now, but I wanted to make sure I give Robin and Rupert an opportunity to give some of their day-to-day experiences, but I just wanted to open up the conversation. So, Bob.
Okay, thank you for having us today. I'm Rupert Turner. I was hired at this office in 2017, July of 2017. I came from the Boston Public Health Commission over the Woods-Mullen Homeless Bureau. I am a returning citizen. I got out in '09. I went back and got my bachelor's and my master's, and I'm also a licensed substance abuse counselor. Having said that, I do know how hard it is having a criminal record and trying to get employment. So since I've been here, it's been super frustrating at times, but I try to be living in the solution and not in the problem. As Dr. Falk alluded to, we were never really funded with this, with the resources that we need. So I'll just dive right into what we do. The Office of Returning Citizens was created to help returning citizens to recover, reclaim, and rebuild their lives. Our office supports those who return after being incarcerated and released from state and federal and county facilities, and we help those who were previously incarcerated. And we early on we know and we still know that there are 4 or 5 different real immediate resources that returning citizens need. And as you alluded to, Councilor Worrell, is housing. Housing has been a really tough resource to place people in because of their criminal background. I've spoken with many, many men and women who go and live with their grandma, their mother, their uncles, their girlfriends in Section 8 or low-income housing, putting their apartments at risk, but their loved ones love them so much they're not going to put them out. So housing and employment. And I get so many young brothers, older men who've done a long, long time in prison who want to come out and help these young brothers not to go to incarceration, and they want to go and work with the youth, and they cannot get a job because of their criminal record. IDs, mass IDs have been a real challenge, and I scratch my head and go, how come the city of Boston does not have a direct relationship with the Registry of Motor Vehicles, which is the state, to get $25 for a mass ID? I have the brother, Pastor Hobbs, who I've oftentimes had to literally beg for $25, and God bless him, he's graciously helped many of our returning citizens with $25, and other external partners have helped them with a mass ID. You cannot walk around without a mass ID, period. You know, you need a mass ID to get a job, to get resources, to get, and God forbid if the law enforcement stops you on the street, you don't have a mass ID. Healthcare, it's a huge one because oftentimes when you're incarcerated, I know from my lived experience, when you're in the penitentiary, you're not going to get the proper health care. So when they come out, we try to refer them to health care. And that health care means treating the whole person, okay? Mental health, physical health, dental, you know. And thank God for the sister Donise Watson back here and the brother Chris Conway, because they've been collaborated with our office on many occasions, because when people come home, they need mental health. They need a therapist. And Brother Rupert and I have often say, please, get yourself a therapist, because they might can get a job, but they can't keep a job. And if they're trying to reunify with their families, they've been locked up, not to mention being in solitary confinement, you know, for years. So, and then we talk about education. We talk about empowering. We talk about helping people get real jobs, real careers. And we have some success stories, yes, but it's not enough. And two people can't do it all. And, you know, as frustrating and as challenging as it is a lot of times, we may have seen, and I have some numbers later I can go through, but we have seen a lot of people come through. But the goal is to hopefully make sure that they're plugging into the resources that they're seeking. So I just want to say I'm grateful to be here. I'm grateful that you as council, city, are going to fund this office. It's a long time coming, because that's going to help us to empower returning citizens. It's going to help us to capture what they're really looking for. And when they leave out of our office, they want to leave out with hope and health, you know, and they want to feel that they belong in their communities. Because finally, I'll say what you brought up, Brother Worrell, is that they come out excited. They come out enthusiastic. But when they out here for a few 24s, they're probably going to get super discouraged very quickly, because they're already feeling some kind of way rejected from society and their loved ones. So if we can't show them love and support when they come home, then this office should not be in place. All right, I'll stop.
Thank you very much, Rupert.
Hi, my name is Rupert Saunders, and excuse me, I'm a placement specialist for ORC. It's a hard job. Why? Because you have so many employers claiming to be Corey friendly, and they're not. One of the things that ORC we're not going to do is set our clients up for failure. That's most important. We've established relationships with employers that are Corey friendly, and you know, that's a good thing. One of the things we tell our clients when they come out is that you have to get in where you fit in. For now, this is a temporary process. Mm-hmm. You know, a lot of times when you're laying up there in prison, by the way, I'm a returning citizen also, federal and state. So I know the ropes, I know how it goes. At some point, you got to get tired of being sick and tired. You know, and that's what we catch them at. When they come to the office and we do our intake, we sit them down. We have all sorts of personalities. We got the rah-rahs. We got the ones that, you know, want to intimidate us. It doesn't work. Because what it is we meet them where they're at. If I got to go back to the hood and talk to you to get you back up here, that's where we go. You know, and they understand that, you know, because you can't baby them, you can't pamper them. You got to be upfront with them. You got to be serious with them. They're so used to being told what to do that when you give them the option of making their own decisions, they start thinking about things, you know. And we start off with a mild thing. If you need job training, we're going to put you in a job training program. If you want a job, then we're going to sit down and talk about what kind of work you want. And they say, well, I ain't got no resume, man. I ain't never really worked. Yes, you did. You worked in prison. That's a job. An employer don't look at how much you made at the last job. They look at where you work. Okay, so we create a resume for them. Some of them been down 30 years. but they worked in maintenance in Shirley. They worked in, so we create a resume. My whole point and my whole goal is to get them that one job first. Why? Because once I get you that one job, on the top, that's where it's going to be on your resume. All that stuff at the bottom don't even count. You know, so we use strategies. You got to use some kind of strategy. We even get them a seasonal job just so we could put it at the top. You know, because a lot of times UPS don't care where you've been. They just want you to hand out the packages and all that. You know, we got to make all sort of strategic moves to help our clients, you know. Most, if not 90% of our clients that come to the office are really ready to get back into society. They just need the support, you know. You know, we get situations where, well, I don't have no bus pass, I don't know how to get around. So we got to try to finagle that. We got to try to figure a way to help them out in that area. Certain areas they can't go in because of past history. We got to maneuver all of that. You know, we're not going to put them in no harm's way or anything. And that's, you know, it's a challenge, but you have to have the passion for working with returning citizens. You really do. You have to have that love and that passion. You know, you don't necessarily have to been there and done that, but you got to have that desire to want to really help those that need the help.
Thank you, and it's evident, Rupert and Robert, just from hearing y'all talk, that like you have both the passion and the love, and that you've been doing it with not a lot of resources. So I thank you all for the words that you share with us so far, just the nuts and bolts, so that everybody can have an understanding of what the office is and what it currently looks like. So we're working on a budget of about $330,000 right now. How many staff members are there in the office?
Currently?
Currently.
There's two staff people with an open director position that we are looking to post now that we have a new chief of human service. I think a part of this also is that the Office of Returning Citizens is no longer going to be under the Office of Public Safety, just for narrative sense. It's not a good look to have that office directly attached to public safety where we're already trying to remove a stigma. It's not add an added stigma to it, so it's going to be moving under the Human Service Cabinet. You know, we just hired a new chief, so there's an opportunity for us to then we're going to post a director position, and it's going to be a standalone department within the Human Service Cabinet. So we have an open slot director position, two current staff people, and looking to hire an additional 5 staff people to do a lot of this case management, a lot of this additional referrals and supportive services that right now Robin and Rupert are doing the lion's share of.
Thank you. And then another question is, could you walk us through what this new budget would look like, the new 1.3, like what does that entail? How much is that a staff? Is there any budget, is there anything in there for discretionary spending? Just give us a picture of what that looks like.
So, a portion of the staff, the salary is for, a portion of the budget is for discretionary spending. I'm just got to give you estimates. I don't have the exact numbers in front of me right now. So for the discretionary spending, and let me add something as well. One of the gaps that isn't identified is a housing allotment. So that is some of the portion that we're trying to get to as well. That's some of the gap that we're trying to figure out, and that's where we really want to lean in with the council to figure out what is the best method or mode for that. We know that there is particular housing buckets that are out there. So the question is whether or not do we tap into some of these existing housing buckets to establish this housing for returning citizens, or are we going to add this to the ORC's budget? So that, I would love to have some additional conversation around that, what we think the best method would be for that. So for the additional staff, and just to estimate, I believe it's about $700,000 for the additional staff members, and with the remaining being for discretionary spending to fill the gaps, whether it be around some of the ID information, paying for IDs, paying for other essential documentation, and some of the other sort of obstacles that sometimes confront some of the clientele that we work with. I think our role is to remove as many obstacles as possible to create that smooth transition. So I'll make sure I get you the exact budgetary numbers, but we're still in the budget process now, but I'll make sure I get you those.
Thank you. One of the things that we've seen in other cities, like in DC, the Mayor's Office of Returning Citizens Affairs, is that they do provide vital documents free of charge to returning citizens, and that while also able to use discretionary spending in other cities to do things such as help with housing stipends.
Yeah.
Or, I heard Robert talking about, and Rupert talking about the difficulty in employment. And what you see some cities doing is offering that employment stipend in the very beginning to make it more likely that an employer will hire that person, because you either have a city or a nonprofit organization that's willing to subsidize the first few months of that employment. And we have organizations here that do that work, even if it's not with the returning citizens population, with, there's an organization here called Break Time, and what they do is for our young folks transitioning out of the foster care system who are experiencing homelessness, they provide them with stipends in the beginning to start off work, so that an employer is more likely to take a chance on someone when you provide that initial funding. So one of the things that we're supporting and hoping to get with more discretionary funding, so that we can do those partnerships with community groups, and also so that we can, make it easier for folks to access employment.
Absolutely.
I was wondering, Dr. Falk and Robert and Rupert, if you'd be willing to talk about for you what those additional employees would be doing in the office of returning citizens. I think you spoke to those 5 additional. So, as case managers, are they peer navigators? Who are they?
So I think we're still in the process of trying to figure out exactly what's going to be the best fit in terms of what the need to. What we really want to do, we want to make sure that we're actually fitting the exact need. But the idea is that to have 3 individuals working in a case management sort of capacity, and an additional 2 working in a resource employment specialist capacity. But we're still trying to figure out exactly. So again, a portion of the individuals will be going into some of these lot facilities, whether it be in the South Bay, the Nashvilles of the world, but also to the Department of Corrections in the state system, ensuring that we are meeting individuals before they come home, connecting with those reentry specialists that are behind the wall to ensure that there's a smoother transition. So for instance, we have an individual who's coming home in the next 9 months that might be in a minimum security at Pondville. How do we make sure that we're connecting with their reentry specialists? So and we know they're coming back to Roxbury or Dorchester, ensuring that there is a smooth transition from Pondville to the ORC directly to resources. So again, and also to a point that Robert made is about how are we assisting and aiding the whole person? So the mental health component, recognizing that we have 2 mental health advocates here. We have Joseph Bennett and Donnie Watson here, who are mental health advocates, and talking about the importance of ensuring that we are not only creating spaces, but we are removing the stigma attached to sort of needing some additional mental health support. So talking about having somebody either on staff, or are we contracting out to ensure that we have those resources at the hands of our clientele. So I think we still have a level of flexibility. We haven't been tied in directly to what those roles will be, but we're talking about this case management, and then on this referral side, and the referral side can deal with everything from some of those mental health supports and some additional support. So I don't know if you have anything.
Yeah, I wanted to add in and follow up with compartmentalizing certain roles in the Office of Returning Citizens, particularly workforce development, a housing specialist, particularly who knows the housing industry. I tried to take on that role many times of helping, because I just love helping, and I would bite off more than I can chew. But it's nothing wrong with, when people come home, to get them applications filled out, because simultaneously, while they're building their resume, their job career, and they're rebuilding their lives, a year later, or roughly, or whoever knows what kind of timeline, they can have these applications, and by that time, when their number comes up for an apartment, they've got an employer who gives them a good word. They have, they have their family. They have people from the community. So a housing specialist, a liaison that toggles between the federal and the state in the houses of correction. And Rufus is, I get this 2 names that are always confused, because they're both
Rufus, Rupert, and Robert.
Right, exactly. But we have to have somebody who is communicating with people inside the walls, the administrators behind the wall, because it is an inside job. We have so many people who've done so much work on themselves through restorative justice projects inside the prison, that so when they come out, they've already pretty much made amends. They worked on themselves. They're ready to be better people. But if we have an individual who's communicating with, say, the credible messengers they just hired roles in the state prison system, or the federal, or the houses of correction. That way, we know that before they come out, it's a smoother transition. And finally, peer navigators. People who have been out for maybe a year or two, who have lived experience, who can help them navigate their way around the city of Boston, because they're like a deer in headlights when they come out. So they don't know their way around. So we might have them as part-timers who can say, hey, take them and show them around and help them feel comfortable, learning how to go apply for DTA, for housing, for jobs, for clothing. But finally, I want to say, in terms of what's going to hopefully be in this budget, is money for mass IDs, money for bus passes, money for clothing, money for stipends. And I loved your approach with the employers who would hire, say, 3 months and then hopefully, hire permanently, but money for job stipends. Just to have that in-house discretionary funds, so that we don't have to go beg, borrow, and steal as a city office from, in order to get the resources that they really need. So.
Thank you, Robert. I'm going to stop talking so that my colleagues have a moment to speak, but I love what you all mentioned about wholeness, because that's what this work is about, the journey, walking folks alongside folks that journey to wholeness that we all need to be walking on, right? But especially for folks who are living with the trauma of incarceration and experiencing that. We had hoped that more members of the administration would have been here, because this is not just a work that happens in silos, right? BPHC needs to be part of this conversation. The Office of Housing needs to be part of this conversation, right? It's not just work in the Office of Returning Citizens. It's BPHC, Office of Recovering Services, Office of Housing, because all of us need to own the work that needs to be done here, and it can't just happen. We don't have the budget for it all to happen in one place. So, it's a hard week because of school vacation week, but we're hoping that the administration really leans into the work that needs to be done to help out folks who it's often too easy for us to ignore. So I want to just mention that we've been joined by my city council colleague, Michael Flaherty. So hello, Mike. I don't know if you want to say something or.
Just briefly, obviously, thank you for chairing and for hosting and sponsoring. It's good to see everybody. One of the striking statistics was in the original hearing order was that the percentage of residents being served by the Office of Returning Citizens has increased by more than 700% since the first year of service. That's a staggering number, 700%. So obviously wanting to make sure that the current budget is appropriate to handle the demand as well as the resources that the gentleman was just asking for. And also, it's also important to note that particularly those that are sort of re-entering society, that they've paid their debt to society. And I've served in a front role, obviously, as a former prosecutor, and also served as president of this council. We created a standalone committee on CORA reform, and we led efforts, and most recently Council President Flynn and I had chaired and co-sponsored along with our colleagues a hearing on that, and to make sure that we're making good on our word to those folks that are returning, and make sure that those programs are there for them, and that they're being connected to the resources. And so if I get a question, I guess it would be, is there a program right now that is working, or are there a couple programs that are working? Like someone that's coming out of the House of Correction or out of prison, is there a program that someone is steering them to? Hey man, you got to check out this program. This was a game changer for me. I was able to get my life back on track with employment and housing and healthcare and training. Is there a program that currently exists that people rave about and rally around? And if so, how do we emulate that and duplicate that across the city? I think that's because a lot of this is sort of word of mouth. Someone comes out, they got two options. They can go back down the road they were on, which you've seen that, and the recidivism rate, it's like a spin dry, and you go right back through the system, or you decide to take a kind of a different road, and that road is gonna be a hard road, but if the resources are there, and the outreach is there, and the services are there, and the funding is there, that's when we change that person's life, we reconnect them back to their family and to their children or to their parents, and that's all good stuff. But I guess what's that sort of one, if there's a program that comes off the top of your tongue right now that this program works, might not even be in Boston or Suffolk County, it could be out in Western Mass, or it could be in another state, but I want to sort of take best practices and I want to implement them here, particularly that we have a 700% increase. So clearly there's a demand there. If we're missing opportunities on a day-to-day basis, I can tell you this for sure, every single day there is a CEO moving his or her company to Boston. Why? Because we have the best colleges and universities in the world. We have the best hospitals and network of community health centers, financial services, life sciences. It's all happening in addition to championship sports teams, right?
Yeah.
We got a lot of mojo going on right now in Boston. People want to be here. Companies are coming here.
Yeah.
We have an opportunity to train the workforce for those companies. And I'm not talking about, and I'm speaking as a former Teamster, which there are great Teamster jobs. Teamsters need drivers, great wages, great benefits, health care, annuity, pension, it's all there. Just walk over to Local 25 today. I'll bring you over there. We'll put a lot of people to work because of the demand. But when you're talking about the jobs here, we want to make sure that those good paying jobs, the careers, are going to folks that are trained and ready to go. And if we're missing the boat, then we need to figure out how to get that right, because again, the demand is there on the employer side as well.
Yeah.
So how do we connect all these dots? And if there is a program that currently works, then let's, whether we have to sort of, I guess, steal the idea, if you will, or we have to create our own program that models that. So again, I don't want to take away from the line of inquiry, but I'm sitting here and I'm saying this, what's working? And if something is working and you guys know about it and it's benefiting the folks that are reentering, then we ought to be doing that. I think, on a large scale. Yeah, so thank you, Mr. Chair.
To answer your question, I think there are a few answers. So the ORC has successes. They have helped individuals transition from incarceration to gainful employment. I think there are programs throughout the city that have had successes, but they've just been piecemeal. The part of this conversation is pulling all these pieces together. And I think that's where we've been sort of lacking in the level of coordination of services. There are services in the gallery right now that fill a gap that right now the city of Boston doesn't fill. But there are also services that the city of Boston provides that are a part of this network of services for returning citizens. So to answer your question, no program has 100% approval rating, but I think there are great pieces that we can integrate into the city of Boston. But to your employment part, I think the part that's been missing is a universal buy-in. We talk about returning citizens, we talk about second chances, but that language doesn't come from, it's not a uniform speech, it's not a uniform fight. I know some of us have been fighting on the ground saying we give millions of dollars to corporations to come here and set up shop, but there's no incentives to hire individuals with Corys. There's no incentives. Like, how do we put the pressure on some of our corporate partners to say, okay, you're going to come here. We need to make sure that you're hiring a certain number of individuals impacted by Corey directly. How do we write that in? Like, these are some of the fights that haven't been had that I think we need to really lean in on, because to your point, there are billions of dollars of construction, there's billions of dollars of industries that are moving in here, but we haven't put the pressure on them to do anything for the communities in which we serve. So we would love to be a part of those conversations, I'm sure, as many individuals in this advocate space.
I just want to add to that is that you asked about what's working. One of the partners that we partner with is Mass Hire. And Mass Hire has a WIO, Workforce Innovative Opportunity Act program down there. That's federal funding. And we've gotten many, and Rupert can speak to it, of men. I don't know if any women got it, but they got their CDLs, and they absolutely got into the Teamsters Union, absolutely. But you're right, there is Boston is small, Boston is resource rich. It has several community-based organizations that when returning citizens come home, they may have had a history of substance abuse, and they may need a different kind of a referral. They may need mental health counseling and substance abuse counseling. They often partner with the Gavin Foundation and get ATR. And that's a wonderful program. I'm in long-term recovery. I love ATR, but that's for that individual. They have Mass Hire. They have community work services that we help people get their industrial commercial cleaning, culinary arts through NECAT. So there are partners that we partner with,
Yeah.
but we meet the individual where they're at and ask them what do they want to do. And again, it could be a temporary job, but until they can figure out what their long-term goals are. You know what I mean? But one thing I want to mention is Baltimore, the city of Baltimore has a program called Turnaround Tuesdays. And the CEOs or whoever collaborated, they got together and got John Hopkins to hire hundreds of thousands of returning citizens. And a gentleman that I work with, Bob Mara, he's a retired, worked in the healthcare field, and he wanted to get Mass General Hospital on board with something like that. And that would be a great approach if we could ever begin to have those conversations. But you're absolutely right. What's working? There are many little different parts that's working, but the Office of Returning Citizens, in spite of having just 2 staff, we've made a pretty good reputation for ourselves. And although we've kind of punched in the mouth here and there because we can't be all things to all people, and we're under-resourced and underfunded, but once I feel like we get funded and resourced, we can begin to build up.
Which was great.
And we should be careful about the sort of saying that Boston is resource rich too, because some of those resources don't hit the people who need them the most. So you can, and if you're not eligible or there isn't a intentionality around connecting individuals to those resources, right, there's no point in having resources if I don't know where they are, or B, I'm not even eligible to get to them. So that's some of the sort of red tape that we have to get through as well. We do have a lot of resources here, but for some individual, they A, don't hear about the resources, or B, there isn't an intentionality about making sure that they are connected to them.
And then we have folks that are in separate silos and or not working together or competing for the same sort of precious resources. So everyone kind of will stay to themselves for fear of maybe losing those resources. So I think we need to do a better job maybe of identifying those resources and making sure that folks are communicating with one another. And case in point, I actually still have my CDL. In case someone returning citizen wants to run against me someday and puts me out of office, right? I can go back and drive a truck as a Teamster. But one other factor is just for employers' perspective, because we've had this discussion, walking through the Ray Flynn Marine Industrial Park, all those blue-collar jobs, one of the main concern from the employers was the fear of someone starting there and then immediately going out on workers' comp. There was a program, I think, that existed, maybe the federal government or the state government was helping to maybe offset that in the event that that happened. So I know that that is a concern from employers, and I'm coming at it from someone I was born in the old Harbor Projects. It's the hustle, right? You come out and you're trying to do good and you're trying to make things better and you get a job and you don't like the job, and or, because you're just, that's how your mind works. You're going to turn around and you're going to do a slip and fall at the company. You're going to go see Dr. Summeroff, and it's Easy Street. And next thing you know, you get a comp case going on against the employer who was reaching out as an opportunity to give you a sort of a second chance. That happens. And so as a result of that, employers, they have those natural concerns, and how do we sort of ease those concerns, or how do we sort of maybe bridge that? And I know that there was a program that existed at one of the 2 levels that would maybe step in that particular situation to offset, I guess, a comp claim. And so, but to your point, Rufus, there are opportunities out there. There are employees out there that need employees. They do have some concerns around that. And I'm just coming at it sort of as a street kid saying that I've seen this movie before, and we've provided opportunities, and 1 or 2 days of work, or maybe after the second week, guy kind of doesn't like the job, but he doesn't want to go without the paycheck. So it's that hustle that I think that some of them are concerned about, and how we eliminate that, or we offset that, so that well-intentioned folks that want that opportunity, want to get the training, want that job or that career, are not encumbered by the person that might have came before them that got a little cute and got a little slippery and want to kind of play the game, play the system a little bit. And that's a factor here that I think we need to at least identify as well, that in the effort to try and help people.
I would say that in that instance, that comes back to the city and us having conversations with employers, saying that these are individuals that we vetted, these are individuals that have gone through a training process, who've received their soft skills, and we want to dispel that narrative that individuals who are returning citizens or individuals who are impacted by Corey are just looking for the next come up. No, these are individuals really trying to change the trajectory of their life cycle. So if it comes to us creating certificates saying that this individual went through a certain amount of training and we vouch for these individuals, we might have to do that as well, because a large part of the gap for us is placement and ensuring that individuals are being placed in positions where they can change their life trajectory and have a real career opportunity to be able to make real wages. And if we can take one extra step with it, again, creating that level of a certificate or saying that we vouch for these individuals, I think that might go a long way to sort of bring in some more employers to hire folks. So if that could be something that we could think about, that could be a possibility as well.
Yeah, you were able to give the good housekeeping stamp of approval. That will sort of will restore confidence. So thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councilor Flaherty. Thank you, Rufus. I think right now, please hold tight. We are going to go to some online testimony of some folks who are some advocates who have to leave. So we have on Zoom Leslie Creedle for Justice for Housing, who is going to offer testimony about some of the housing challenges and opportunities for formerly incarcerated individuals. So Leslie, your time.
Thank you, City Councilor Ruthie, for inviting me to testify.
1 second, Leslie. We got to work on the volume. And while that's happening, we also, I'm delighted to note that we also, just want to make sure that this is right. Yeah, we also have on the line Executive Director for the Mayor's Office of Returning Citizen Affairs from DC, Lamont Carey, the Executive Director here to share with us some of the best practices. Their office has been doing a lot of really great work. They've seen their budget really substantially increase as a result of the work that they've been doing. So we got to learn from each other and learn from what other cities are doing well. And so I'm glad to have him here to offer some testimony right after Leslie. So thank you for being here, Lamont.
Yeah. Hi. Thank you, Lucy, for inviting me to testify today. I don't want to preach to the choir and tell you about the issues. We all know the issues. I'm directly affected, formerly incarcerated. Today, I want to talk about some of the work that we have done and some of the solutions that we have created in Justice for Housing in the past 2 years. There's a gentleman there that asked about what programs are out there and what programs work. Well, we have 2 programs that we created that work. Last year, we housed 23 directly affected, formerly incarcerated individuals, and we reunited 9 of them with their children who were in DCF care. This year, we partnered with the Boston Housing Authority, who has become our ally and surprisingly a great partner for us. And we launched this year in January the first pilot program that provides subsidy vouchers for formerly incarcerated individuals returning home from incarceration. Since January, we housed 18 formerly incarcerated men and women. In 2 months, 13 of them were housed, and 7 families were reunited with their children from DCF. So 23 children came out of DCF care back to their rightful parent, because one of the requirements for DCF is stable housing. And when you come out of prison, nobody has money for housing, right? Nobody can afford the rent. And so this pilot program created that avenue for those parents. And so not only are we housing individuals, we're also, what we have done is stabilize individuals, increase public safety, provided an avenue for individuals to take a breath and find a meaningful job, meaningful employment, not have to rush and take a minimum wage job because they're homeless, right? They've also been able to sustain themselves and their family, keep doctor's appointments, and provided a safe space for them to heal from the trauma and incarceration. What we have done is motivated people to stay clean, right? Substance abuse, mental health. When you have a subsidy voucher, you don't want to lose that, right? And also, we provided a way to decrease probation violations, parole violations. Another another way for people to want to hold on to their lifestyle, want to hold on to their livelihood. So housing individuals with subsidy vouchers also motivates them to live transgression-free and drug-free. So these are some of the solutions that we have created since we inception. We have housed 36 formerly incarcerated individuals and reunited 23 children with their parents. Those are the statistics that we can show, we can prove. But the problem is the city keeps funding the same agencies. And this gentleman just said he's looking for a program that works. This program works. We have an outside evaluator from Brigham and Women's Hospital who has been monitoring. We have partnerships with Whittier Stern Healthcare where they get their mental health substance abuse. And we have a partnership with the city of Boston where they get credit repair and credit building, because it's an 18-month program. And after they finish their 18 months program, we're going to transform them into home ownership and provide them means to purchase their own home. So they become homeowners and not renter. So it generates wealth for our community and keeps our community, individuals who are from our community inside our community. I just want to say that the statement where, you can steal our program or you can mimic our program, that is the problem. Us grassroots organizations, we have the answers, we're directly affected, and we know what we're doing. But these state agencies, they come in with all their wealth and their money, and they don't want to fund us, but they want to steal our ideas. And so that right there is why I copyrighted everything that I did. So I have solutions, I have answers. I'm willing to sit down with any agency, any organization, state, city, whatever, and find real meaningful ways to house people. We put in city budget last year, this year with Rep. Aguado to fund the SHOP program for another year. And also we put in a budget amendment to fund the formerly incarcerated housing bill. So we can find ways to work together. I saw an ad the other day that the mayor funded $38 million to the same housing agencies from last year. And I get phone calls every day from individuals who are referred by those same agencies that were funded. They're sending their clients to me. And it's just absurd that, they're funded and we're not, but we're housing people. And we have impact, we're making an impact. We also partnered with Harvard University. We worked with HUD this year. We created 10 policy recommendations on the public housing level that will get rid of those unwritten discretionary policies. And Boston Housing is working with us. Rep. Lucy is working with us on these policies, hopefully to make city ordinances on the municipal, local level. And we have this lovely case study report that we did on the harms and the collateral consequences that public housing authorities have on communities of color. And so there are 10, 12 policy recommendations that will get rid of majority of the problems that formerly incarcerated people face, being discriminated from public housing coming out of prison. And Boston Housing and I, and Ruzi, and Rep. Aguado want to take this across the state to get every housing authority on board with us to stop the discrimination, stop the barriers, because we are worthy of housing just as much as anybody else. Thank you.
Thank you, Leslie. I know you're on a time crunch, so I appreciate you. I know that I have questions and folks have questions, but I want to respect your time. I saw you holding up the Far From Home report. I'm going to make sure that all of my colleagues get a copy of that. Speaking of colleagues, I want to acknowledge that President of the City Council, Councilor Ed Flynn, is here and has joined us, so thank you for being here. I don't know if anyone, has any questions for Leslie before she has to head out, but I'll just say this, is that this is a perfect opportunity for us to work together with the Office of Returning Citizens on the issue of housing and to think creatively about how we can be funding vouchers or helping with support with folks who do find housing, helping them to stabilize that housing. So I think there's great opportunity and partnership here. And also you mentioned something that the money goes to the same people all the time. That's a cycle that we need to break. And one of the first things that I had to do as a city councilor is prove to an organization, to a state agency, that a Black and Brown run organization was worthy of receiving funds, right? Because they were gonna give it to another well-known, well-established organization that was just gonna go around and turn to the Black and Brown run organization and say, how should we spend this money, right? And so we have to do a lot better job of being in deep, deep partnership with community and really trusting folks who have lived that experience and experienced that of pain, of incarceration, the trauma of that, to really lead the way. So that's why I'm incredibly excited by the work that you're doing, the advocacy that you've been doing around the state and in the city of Boston. So I thank you, but this is a really great opportunity of something that's working and how we can work together to make it even stronger. So thank you, Leslie. Thank you. And now we're gonna turn to Lamont Carey, who's also on Zoom, from the DC Office of Returning Citizens Affairs. Thank you, Lamont, for being here. We can't hear you at the moment.
I'm sorry, I had the mic on. We're actually the mayor's office on Returning Citizens Affairs. I loved a lot of the presentations that I heard so far. So some of what Morca does in DC, one of the things when individuals get released, some of the main things that they need, as we know, is the birth certificate and social security card. So that is some of the first services that we provide to individuals. So we also has vouchers to cover the cost of birth certificate, vouchers that covers the cost of the ID, driver's license, learners. We have programs with partnerships that allow us to offer programming for CDL. We have relationship that allows for individuals that have tickets to resolve those tickets so that they can have access to driver's license. But one of our primary direct services is case management. So when an individual comes into Morca, they do an intake, get an assessment done to determine what the needs are and what the wants that the individual have. So for us, the wants are equally important so that we can connect individuals to services and opportunity that's in line with their future goals for themselves. And our belief is that we can get them connected to opportunities that they're interested in, not opportunities that traditionally returning citizens have been steered in the direction of. And for us that have been construction, that had been retail, but a lot of returning citizens came home and they want to do computer programming or IT. So we connected with organizations that can provide that. They want to get their CDL license. So the want of the assessment is as equally important as what the needs are, because if we can instill the hope in the individuals, that way when we connect them to employment, that they don't just last at the job for a few days or a few paychecks, because it's in line with what they want for themselves. A prime example I could use, if an individual is interested in opening the car lot, we know if we get them a job working at a car lot or working with the organization that operates in the space that they want to work in, that kind of helps them see that they are aligned with the path and direction that they want to go into. So once an individual sees our case managers determine what the needs and the wants are, we will connect them, whether it's behavioral health, substance abuse, Department of Age and LGBTQ, veterans. Depending on what the need is, we know what kind of organizations or sister agencies we need to connect them with. But if it's education, employment or job training, we also have a bucket of that is the workforce development team that will sit with them. So a lot of our people that come home without the education are really looking to go to school. And so having returned citizens, a huge makeup of our team, they're able to tell them the value of being able to get the high school diploma or GED, how that creates an opportunity for them to get into some of these apprenticeship programs and these other accredited kind of programs that will lead to the career jobs that they're in search of. So our workforce development team helps them get connected to education, training opportunities, as well as employment opportunities. So our team is actively in the community, building relationships with employers, but also within DC government. We have a lot of returning citizens that are inside of DC government. Mm-hmm. Then we have an outreach team who focus on making sure that we are reaching returning citizens in the community that aren't aware of us. So we go into the community, we go into institutions, and they even engage with juveniles to work on prevention so they won't end up being one of our clients. The new addition to our team is navigators, peer navigators. And all of our peer navigators are returning citizens because we want individuals with those lived experiences that have walked down that pathway that leads or led them to success or career gainful employment. And that way, when an individual runs into a barrier, our team is able to troubleshoot with them to figure out how to overcome that barrier, because our ultimate goal is for them to complete every referral that they receive. Because how we see it is that the referrals that they receive is the foundation to their successful reentry. So any referral that isn't completed, we see that as a hole in their reentry plan. So none of what we do would be successful without extensive partnerships with other government agencies, nonprofit and for-profit entities. And this way, when we connect to an individual, we can kind of align them with the exact thing that they need in order for them to be successful. Now, housing. So housing, vital records, and employment are the main three buckets of things that individuals are in search of when they come here. What I don't like is that if an individual get released and goes into a shelter, that switches their focus. They're not focused on, well, many of them are not focused on reentry related opportunities because they're trying to get out the shelter, get something to eat, and get back to the shelter in time to have a bed. And so we work tirelessly to build relationship with transitional housing and other kind of housing providers to be able to connect them to housing, as well as we provide a limited amount of vouchers to our clients so that we can provide some form of housing. But what we don't want to do is provide all of the programming, all of the resources, because then we become competitors to the entities that exist in our community that can serve our constituents. And so our focus is how we build strong relationship with quality programs to be able to provide, connect our clients to the services that they need. Then I think lastly, what I would say, some of the in-house programs that we initiated that works for us, we have a partnership that allows us to provide what is called Promise Rides. And Promise Rides allows us to provide free cab rides for returning citizens, 5 rides a week. to reentry related services. Now, what is reentry related services or opportunities? That could be anything. It could be an individual trying to connect to get to his children so that he could build the bonds, the family reunification. So we see that as reentry related opportunities, as well as going out for job interviews and so forth. Another program that we implement is called the gift of giving. The gift of reading, because we know the majority of our clients are returning to communities that are underserved, that have higher literacy rates. But in prison, our population tend to read a whole lot of books. And so we want to remind them that of their enjoyment of reading, but also give that gift to the children or the young people in their life. So one, it can help build bonds between them and the person that returned as citizen. Two, widen the world for them that will introduce those children to opportunities. But the main goal for everything that we do is one, to provide a real second chance for returning citizens and to increase public safety. And it's just our thinking that if we can connect returning citizens to resources, that we can decrease increase public safety, but also give them the tools to start businesses. So we have entrepreneurship programs that we connect our staff, our client base to. We do a whole lot of financial literacy. We do things on know your rights. And one of our main partners is the Department of Human Rights. So the Department of Human Rights enforces the barriers that we remove. That includes ban the box on job applications, where an employer can't have it on the job application and they can't ask them have they been convicted of a crime during the interview. This also covers housing. When an individual applies for an apartment or rent a house or try to get a home, that can't be a part of the discussion, as well as occupational licenses that cannot be a part of discussion unless it's closely related to the crime that they were in. But then they have an opportunity to go before, present their case on why they should be given this license. So we work tirelessly to provide opportunities for returning citizens. And I think what makes us unique in a way is that I'm a returning citizen. I'm also a cabinet member in the mayor's office. So I directly advises the mayor and advocate for returning citizens on what barriers that exist for them and what needs to be removed. And so because of my position, because my access to the mayor, we have removed several barriers, but in addition to that, we have created opportunities where we have this funding now where returning citizens that move into a home with a family member, some funding can go towards that household to help stabilize that housing for a little while longer. Another program that we're implementing through a partnership is giving returning citizens Chromebooks, because technology is one of the biggest barriers. So we're doing things like that to enable returning citizens to be successful. But one of the main keys is that the focus is on what it is that they want to do and how can we align them with those opportunities for them to be successful. And one of the ways that we do that by hiring them within DC government.
Thank you very much, Director Carey. I'm going to turn it over to my colleagues, but I'm glad that you highlighted that point that you had mentioned to me previously in our previous discussions about, thinking about non-traditional ways or ways that we don't traditionally think of when it comes to helping folks out. Stabilizing housing, if they have some sort of informal housing situation with friends or family, like how can we help to stabilize that household? And by giving folks the resources or stipends directly, cutting out any of the bureaucracy, I think that is one really great way that we can help. I'm going to turn it over to if you can stay on just in case anyone has any questions as we think about what DC is doing and comparing it to the work we're doing here. I'm going to turn it to my council colleagues, starting with Council Orwell, if you have any questions for either our administration or Director Carey, now's the time.
Yeah, thank you to the panelists. Amazing work that you guys are doing on such a small budget, and I'm advocating to get you guys the resources. Dr. Falk, you mentioned who is deserving of a second chance, right? That we have to do more community work around that. Is there a certain population that is less likely that we see in our community that's being deserving of that second chance?
Can you rephrase that?
Like within our returning citizens,
Yeah.
you're saying, well, what I'm hearing is
Yep.
there might be some populations within, whether it's the crime that they committed, and like if there's certain populations within that returning citizens that are less likely to get some of these opportunities, these resources, and this assistance.
Absolutely. So in the city of Boston, we recognize that disproportionately black people in general, and by black I'm using the macro sense, I don't care if you speak Spanish or French Creole, I'm going to define you as black, already have systemic barriers. And then you add an additional barrier to that around CORI or being labeled as a returning citizens, that just puts you further behind the 8 ball. So when we're talking about narratives, we're talking about changing the narrative, we're talking about being intentional around providing resources. We're talking specifically around removing obstacles for those black people who live in Roxbury, Dorchester, Mattapan, Hyde Park, who were the most directly impacted by draconian drug policies that lock so many of our brothers and fathers up. In saying that we need to be intentional around policies to right those wrongs, to repair those wrongdoings. So when we're talking about narrative, that's some of the narrative I'm talking about, because you can simply grow up in these neighborhoods. You can grow up on Humboldt and be viewed in a certain way. So imagine also being somebody already stigmatized by the larger society, but then have to carry a CORI with you. Then that just doubles and makes sure your sort of travels that much more difficult. So again, returning citizens in the whole are stigmatized, but even more so, black men and women have to sort of bear the brunt of that, even more so.
Thank you for that. And then, Mr. Turner, you was answering the question around what programs work, and this question is for everyone. Is there, I know we mentioned CDL, is there any other careers that we see, returning citizens kind of excelling? I know a few that are some great cooks, a few that are some great mechanics, but is there any other careers that? Yes, sir.
Well, there's a combination, and meeting people where they're at, sitting down, having the individualized case management session with them. I've heard anywhere from they practice barber, they want to become a barber while they're incarcerated. A lot of times they want to become a licensed drug abuse counselor because they have had issues with substance abuse themselves. So I've referred them to the old Dr. Shea's program at UMass Boston, which is the ASAP program, Addictions Counseling Program. They want to become, they want to go back to school and get their bachelor's degrees in liberal arts. They want to, get into the computers. They want to, it's a combination. Yeah. And again, I loved the Brother Lamont's spiel because, empowering people, because when they've incarcerated for a long period of time, they've had plenty of time to think about what they want to do or what they want to be, for lack of a better way of saying it, when I grow up, right? So there are people who come out and they have these goals and dreams, you know what I mean? So, I could not answer that in one sentence, because you have to have that individual conversation with people and to try to help them get on their path I think is the key of the goal.
We need to make sure that they have access to whatever opportunity that they want to do. So if somebody wants to come out and be an entrepreneur, we have resources within this building that can help facilitate that opportunity. Somebody who wants to get their CDL because they want to be a plow driver, we have resources within the city that can help folks do that. So I think we have to make sure that we are opening up the full utility box and saying, okay, this is what you want to go to. We have some resources within the city. We also have some external partners outside the city who can help you get to that point as well. So whatever area or sort of passion for a career that they want to lead, we need to be able to support folks in that space and open up as many opportunities as possible.
Awesome. And then
this is more so
okay, I thought someone was saying something. This is more of an operational question. And 700% increasing your caseload by 700% is a lot. Is there a certain software, case management, CRM that you guys are using? And also for Lamont, Kerry, you know, can you talk about what software you're using to track all the returning citizens?
So currently we use Salesforce, but we're looking at, I don't know why it just slipped my mind, some other software where we can communicate with other agencies, but currently we use Salesforce to track how many people we see, the demographics of them, and so forth. And to your previous question on the kind of employment that returning citizens, I know at least in our area, personal trainers, real estate, and a whole lot of entrepreneurship. And so different agencies in the government are providing entrepreneurship programming now and providing a little bit of funding for returning citizens to start their business. We even having like pitch contests. But one of the gentlemen mentioned giving back. So we have a lot of individuals that come into our office, and we see somewhere on average like 1,500 individuals a year. And a lot of them want to give back. And so in the district, we have what is called credible messengers. The credible messengers generally work with juveniles, and they're individuals who previously incarcerated, have changed their life in providing guidance to the juveniles. And we have violence interrupters who are inside of the community, stopping feuds and connecting individuals to opportunities. So we're giving returning citizens that opportunity through training to be mentors and guides and navigators to help not only returning citizens, but juveniles. And so we have a lot of that taking place now.
Thank you. No further questions.
Thank you. I want to turn it over to my colleague, Councilor Bach, if you have any questions.
Sure. Thanks so much to the panel. And definitely, I think, definitely heard loud and clear the message, particularly about housing and what a challenge that is. I know that for me, when I last went and talked on a Zoom with the Office of Returning Citizens folks, your guys' focus group, it was all housing. I know that, you know, talking on the other end of the spectrum, talking to our SOAR caseworkers, they are constantly like, housing's the key thing. And so I think that question of sort of how do we target some of the housing resources that we're talking about on the American Rescue Plan side and in the budget in general to serving this population makes a lot of sense, because you guys are always going to have a hard time within ORC having enough scale to like run a real housing assistance program. But with all that in mind, I just wonder if there's any more texture that you guys can give to sort of like what the nature of the housing problems are. I think maybe for a moment bracketing, just selfishly, because I worked at the Housing Authority, I'm pretty familiar with the kind of deep challenges around public housing and the federal housing laws and all of that. And I know that was alluded to earlier by Justice for Housing, and it's a super important topic. But bracketing that piece, just sort of like, you know, is it that folks are kind of doubled up and then they're therefore, you know, they're not on any preference lists? Is it really about getting first, last security? Like just trying to understand, like, is it that people get rejected, even from like private accommodation, just to help give us and the public a bit more of a sense of if we were going to push on some of the levers to bring those barriers down where they might be.
What I would just say briefly before, it's all of the above. We need to have a diverse housing stock available, so everything from single-room occupancies to home ownership, depending on where you're at. And want to make sure that we're expanding this conversation, not to just individuals who just returned, but we have individuals who have been here, who've returned for 4, 5, 6, 10 years, who are still having trouble to secure some stable housing. So broadening it out to just individuals who are impacted by CORI in general, but specifically looking at for those individual returning citizens. So to your point, it's everything from having enough funds to secure a private rental in terms of having the security to first and last, that's a task for individuals who aren't returning citizens, so let alone for individuals whose employment options don't provide a real wage, so that's an issue. So I think we need to be innovative. Again, recognize that individuals are going to be at different points in their lives. So for some individuals, a single room occupancy could be perfect, or dormitory style housing that the city of Boston partners with that can provide 500 beds or 1,000 beds could be something that can alleviate a lot of pressures in our housing stock. So I think we have to have a sort of all-encompassing approach where we're trying to be as innovative as possible, recognize that different individuals are going to be at different points and places, and that we also need to bring in some of our regional partners as well, because to be frank, some individuals, if we're really trying to change their lives, they can't do it returning back to Dorchester. They might have to move to some other places, and we might need to make sure that we have some extended partnerships with some other cities and towns to sort of bear some of the brunt of this weight. So.
Yeah, I definitely want to speak to that because having been at the office almost 5 years, going on 5 years, is housing is one of the first words that come out of people's mouths when they come out of prison. And unfortunately, I have to tell them many times that I cannot help you with immediate housing. What we're doing now, in the here and now, is we're helping them with getting to sober housing. And we got to do better than that. And the Mass Probation Department, God bless them, they're paying 8 weeks for a man and a woman to be in a sober house, doubled up for 8 weeks. And in that 8 weeks, Rupert and I have to help them. Hopefully they have their IDs, and we have to help them get a job. And meanwhile, at the same time, when the office first opened, I was trying to help them to the best of my ability fill out, housing works applications, BHA applications, Home Start, any way possible to get on waiting lists, because in spite of it, they're still going to be on a waiting list. The goal, hopefully, was to be able to try to get them a housing voucher at some point. But as Dr. Falk alluded to, there are other approaches, and that is like the Cardinals Maderos program at the YMCA. 2-year transitional model. They don't pay rent. They have they save their money and it goes into an escrow account. The gym is there. They work out there. They live there. Obviously, they have some rules and guidelines to follow. We're trying to re-establish relationships with the Cardinals Maderos program in Boston. We're trying to establish a relationship with the Chelsea Y in Chelsea, because the feds had some partnership with them over there. Because time, the acronym for time, things I must earn. And me being a returning citizen, it took about 2, 3, 4 years before I even got my first apartment. You know what I mean? So I'm just saying that anyone who's coming out of the penitentiary today is not going to get immediate housing anyway, but there should be a trajectory and a way to get them in the pipeline, to get them on the track to get housing. And I love the Brother Lamont's approach about the band-to-box. Our former governor, Deval Patrick, the first Corey reform bill, the band-to-box, where that should not be in the conversation for employment. That should not be in the conversation for housing. So what housing is a very, very challenging thing for returning citizens. But right as we speak, I'm getting people into sober housing, and I thank God for that, because it's a safe, sober environment through the Mass Certified Housing. And I wish it was longer than 8 weeks funding, but I'm only one person.
Thank you.
And if I could piggyback. So some of the things that we're doing in the district, one, when my office looking at trying to house returning citizens, we remove just looking for housing for returning citizens. We have returning citizens that are seniors, disabilities, like every government agency that exists in the district, the returning citizen may fit into several different categories, and this could give them access to housing, for senior housing or LGBTQ housing. And so we look at outside of the tag of returning citizen, and that opens up a variety of additional housing that we can potentially give people access to. Another thing is that our parole probation, which is called CSOSA, they are engaged in the reentry process, and they even pay for housing, to place people in housing. And we currently do have, one of the agencies have housing that allows for individuals that have to get out of town because it may not be safe for them to remove into another state like Boston. And the last thing that we're pushing for, because there may never be enough housing for returning citizens, so what we're encouraging organizations to do or create is family reunification programs. And that is for 3 reasons. One, so the families can understand the internal and external barriers that their loved ones are dealing with, so they better be able to help support them through the transition. 2, to mend some of those shattered and broken relationships so that our individuals can come home into a support system that already exists. And 3, to connect the families to resources, because right now our office focuses only on the individual. But again, as I mentioned, most of our people are returning to underserved communities. So we try to encourage organizations to create family unification support groups so that we can help connect those families to these other resources that's going to benefit them, so that the whole household be moving forward. And so that's kind of how we're looking at housing. It hasn't completely solved all of our problems, but we do have churches and other organizations that are now interested in the family reunification support groups.
That's great.
But the last thing with that, and that also is going to help us with our individuals before they come home, because one of the things I stress to them is that the family should expect a return on their investment. If they know that the individual doesn't have a high school diploma or a skill set, and if they can encourage them to get that while they're incarcerated, that puts them a little bit ahead of the game. So when they come home, they don't have to go through all of the hurdles that somebody coming home that has to go through that. So those are some of the approaches that we're taking.
Great, thanks so much. And I'm definitely looking forward to partnering with you all on the housing front and thinking about how we can integrate it with some of the programs being proposed on the American Rescue Plan side. I just want to apologize for the fact I'll have to go in a moment, but I'm going to be watching. I'm sure we have some testimony coming, so I will catch it if I miss it in person. But thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councilor Black, and that's very important coming from her because she chairs the COVID-19 Recovery Committee and the ARPA money, so we do want to see a lot of that money going to supporting our folks transitioning home, finding housing. So thank you, Councilor Black. I wanted to turn to Council President Flynn if you had anything you wanted to say or questions you wanted to ask.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I just want to say thank you to you, Councilor Lejeune, and Councilor Worrell for sponsoring this important hearing order. Two years ago, myself and Councilor Flaherty had a hearing order on Corey reform, and listening to Robert about Corey reform speaking, you know, Governor Patrick and the legislature did great work on Corey reform, but we need to go further than that. So maybe that should be a top priority for us here on the council. So listening, and first of all, I want to apologize for being late. Thank you, Dr. Falk, and appreciate the tremendous work you're doing. I was listening to the gentleman from Washington talking about cab vouchers for returning citizens. I was a probation officer for 8 years prior to becoming the city councilor at Superior Court, and my probationers couldn't get from their home to Suffolk Superior Court on the MBTA, and I would say, what do you mean you can't get there? It's only $1.80 or something, $1.50 on the MBTA. But returning citizens, probationers, they didn't have that $2. So I guess my question is, are we able to factor in that issue? You know, DC has cab vouchers, but are we able to provide returning citizens with at least a Charlie card?
So that's a part of the budget that we're asking for, to be able to handle and be able to provide some for that with that discretionary fund to be able to sort of close some of those obstacles that currently exist. Currently, it's not something that we're able to do unless it's digging in our own pocket. So moving forward, we're trying to alleviate that as being an issue.
Thank you, Doctor, and appreciate that. And I know you only have 2 people on your team, and you guys do an outstanding job. I have great respect for the work you're doing. But a budget is a reflection of our values. So as a council, and I know the mayor as well, but we need to make sure that the office is fully funded with more staff. But that should be a priority of ours to make sure that every returning citizen has at least a Charlie card. You know, having access to the MBTA to get your birth certificate is a challenge. My probationers, when they were coming out of incarceration, had to go to City Hall, and they couldn't get there. They needed to get their birth certificate so that they couldn't get an ID.
Yeah.
And then Councilor Worrell and Councilor Lujan, I think you guys had it perfect in your hearing order. Those probation supervision fees, you know, they should be abolished along with the legal counsel fee, the drug assessment fee, the one-time DNA fee of $110 that's paid to the state police. You know, and there's other fees that really, I found that my probationers, when they came back with a list of fees that they had to pay, and they knew they couldn't pay them, they would get extremely discouraged and given up at times.
Yeah.
But we shouldn't burden people with all of those fees. But my final question and comment, again, I want to say thank you to the gentleman from Washington for the great work you're doing, but also the great work you guys are doing here in Boston. So we're going to increase that budget for returning citizens. We can talk further about a Charlie card for returning citizens, but what else is there in the budget that might be lacking now that as a body we can address so that we can try to get the funding in the budget during this time?
I would say the biggest gap is the housing piece. The housing piece and us figuring out exactly sort of where that should live. I'm of the mind that it shouldn't live with the ORC, but there should be an ORC focus in terms of returning citizens, in terms of individuals impacted by Corey, and saying that we want to designate, listening to Ms. Credo speak about the vouchers and that she was able to receive for the BHA. That's something that should be, at the very least, should exist within City Hall with some of our returning citizens that we'd had coming through our offices. So there's ways in which we can piecemeal in the short term to try to get to 250, 500 beds, but then have a long-term vision of saying we want to build and establish housing specific for this population. I think that's the fight that we should be fighting, because without stable housing, I don't care how good your additional programming or educational programming is, you're always going to be in this survival mode. So until we address that, we're not going to be able to fully create a platform and environment for individuals to be able to heal. So I think right now where we're at with this 1.3 for operation is good, but beyond the 1.9 number, it's going to be a larger number to effectively and substantively address the housing concerns. And I think that's where we need our council members to help us lean in on providing some housing options and housing stock specific for this population.
Yeah, right. I agree. That's a good point. From my experience working with probation, is the most discouraging part of it for me as a probation officer is helping someone get a job. They go through the query. They go through the application process, they fill out the query, and they get the job based on the query coming back fine. So they're in the job maybe a week, maybe 2 weeks, and they're excellent employees. They show up on time, they work hard, they're professional, and then the boss will say to them after 2 weeks, we know you're an outstanding employee, but we're letting you go because of your Corey. But my question is, what is the city of Boston doing for returning citizens
Around Corey?
around Corey? So if you have a Corey, you want to apply for a city job, does Boston follow the same commitment to help returning citizens that we should be upholding? Are we doing our part in terms of hiring and making sure that Corey is not something that stays with someone the whole time? So what do you?
The short answer is that we could be doing more. I think if we want to be a leader in this space, we should be a leader in this space. Right now, I'm thinking offhand, we have an initiative out of the Office of Workforce Development in partnership with ORC called Project Opportunity. And that initiative helps individuals with impacted by Corey to get their Corey sealed and expunged. We're actually doing something during reentry week to provide, we're doing some job trainings for individuals impacted by Corey. It's in partnership with Mass Hire, in partnership with Lawyers Clearinghouse to provide free Corey clinics. But to be frank, Counselor, we can always do more. And we need a greater commitment, not only from City Hall, but from some of our employers throughout the city who could easily, if they wanted to, hire 50 individuals to say, okay, we want to hold 50 slots for these individuals. And we're not just talking about just entry-level positions. I'm talking about real wage positions where individuals can be able to afford to not only live, but thrive in the city. So short answer is we're not doing enough, but we can always do more with a more collective effort and vision around saying this is a priority for us.
Well, thank you, Doctor, and thank you, Robert, for the work you're doing, and the gentleman from Washington, D.C., and I didn't get to say hello to this gentleman
Rupert.
here. Yeah, this young fella, so I want to say thank you for the great work everyone's doing, but again, a budget is a reflection of our values. Boston has 2 full-time staffers and returning citizens, and the gentleman from D.C., that office has 13. I was reading the notes here, 13. In Boston, pretty much has the same population as Washington, roughly, what, 650, 700,000 people. So, well, anyway, just want to say thank you to you, Madam Chair, for the work you're doing, and to Councilor Worrell as well. So, thank you.
Thank you, President Flynn. I also want to thank the panel, thank the administration, thank Director Carey for being here. You know, when we started this out, for me, it was about, all right, we need to be meeting people's basic needs. That's what the role of government, that's what we should be doing, right? People need housing, they need health care, they need food. And so when I was thinking about this hearing, it was around, all right, let's talk, what are the basic needs? So I met with you all, met with a lot of folks who are in the gallery, and we talked about basic things like access to IDs. We talked about housing. And we talked about health, particularly mental health. And I know there's a lot more that we can talk about. There are a lot, that even those 3 topics, right? We could have this just on housing for those who are just as involved, formerly incarcerated. We could just talk about that. So we realize, I want to stress again that this is just the beginning of the conversation. We will be holding the administration accountable to making sure that we are responding to the needs of our communities, right? Our returning citizens are members of our communities. They're our neighbors, they're our brothers, they're our sisters. And we got to show up for them because they're living with trauma, and we want to help everyone get to wholeness by meeting their basic needs. So thank you for being here. And you know, we hope that you stick around for the conversation. We have another panel coming up of advocates who've been waiting for their moment to speak. So I thank you all for being here. And I also want to acknowledge that we've been joined by the great Tanya Fernandez-Innocent from District 7, representing Roxbury. So thank you for being here. If we could have our panel of advocates come down to the seats and testify. You'll also be welcome to sit here. We have Jamal Gooding from People Affecting Community Change Global. We have Donise Watson from Crossroads Counseling, Joseph Bennett from Yard Time Entertainment, Chris Conway, Out for Good, and Donnell Wright from Intervision's Empowerment Center, talking about these issues of mental health, access to housing, and IDs. Everyone's going to have about 5 minutes to testify, and then my colleagues will ask questions. So thank you. Feel free to also sit in those chairs as well if you have. So we have some folks waiting on Zoom also to test for public testimony in the gallery. So we're really going to try to keep it as tight as possible. Thank you all for coming. Want to just give everyone some time to talk. So we're going to start with Jamal Gooding.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, members of the council. My name is Jamal Gooding. I am a member of the GBIO committee working on this reentry issue. GBIO is an organization within Boston, the Greater Boston Interfaith Organization, that is comprised of over 61 organizations that is comprised of community members, pastors, rabbis, and just community members. I also am a returning citizen. I am also the executive director and founder of PAC People Affecting Community Change. And I want to just kind of preface that and say, even though our organization is in Brockton, Massachusetts, it operates throughout the South Shore and very much within the Boston realm. So thank you for allowing us to be here today. I had the opportunity, the distinct opportunity, to be on a panel call with Mayor Wu as a candidate. And we had an opportunity to have a conversation about the Office of Returning Citizens. And during that call, it was I, myself, who had the opportunity to ask the mayor to, would she be willing to commit to the $1.9 million that the ORC would need to at least to get up to a functioning point of view, and if she would entertain that office being staffed with over 50% of returning citizens. And at that time, the mayor absolutely committed to that 1.9, as well as to 50% of it being returning citizens. We was pleased. We was elated. It was an opportunity for those of us who are on the ground to finally say that the ORC would get the resources that it needed in order to get some kind of, I guess, grasp around this issue. I'm hearing today that that budget of 1.9, that commitment that the mayor gave, is now gone down. And I am here today to ask you, to beg you, to look at that from the perspective of, we are already fighting an uphill battle. You've heard testimony today that housing in and of itself is not even touched in that budget. Identification, mental health, things that men and women need who are coming home in order to be effective. Why do we need that money? I have serviced over 14,000 people in the last 4 years. We provide jobs, training, housing, transportation, identification, food, and clothing. I will be leaving this meeting today offering the Office of Returning Citizens over 100 rooms as a transition house that would be available to men and women June 15th. And I can tell you that it's been hard meeting men where they are, because we do approach this from a holistic reconditioning of a self point of view. Giving an individual a job does not solve the problem, because it's most likely not a living wage. And part of the connection between PAC, People Affecting Community Change, Brockton, and Boston is because the majority of men and women who are returning to Boston, either because of Corey, cannot get into living quarters, or the rent is too high. So when you get out and I pick you up at the door and you start working tomorrow because we got you your ID and I put you into a room, and you know in order to get into an apartment, you have to do all that you need to do, including giving back, there's a higher level of certainty that people are going to follow those rules. And so when they transition from one house to the next house into their own, this is tangible resources. This is what they need. But as a part of that, we talked about mental health. And if mental health is not in that budget, if housing is not in that budget, we haven't even scratched the surface. I can tell you that my team doesn't sleep. We don't sleep. Because interacting with an individual coming home doesn't go from 9 to 5. When they get into an argument with their girlfriend because they thought that's where they wanted to go first day, and now you're talking about all kinds of situations and they need someone to talk to, the one who picked them up, who got them an ID, who put money in their pocket, who gave them transportation, who gave them a place to leave, is the one they're most likely going to call to try to figure that out. So when we talk about these men and women right now that are in desperate need, it's from both the point of view of public safety as well as it's in the interest of this person as an individual. The $1.9 million that we requested and had been given a commitment to, it's needed, but that's the money. We're talking about men and women and not numbers. So although we're thankful for the budget going from what it was to what it is right now, we know that we needed a starting point of $1.9 million that did not include young adults who are both transitioning out of DYS into adulthood or transitioning back into our community. So there's only one other thing that I would like to ask you is that, do we want to be the city that is known for helping all of its citizens? Don't give us half of what we need and expect the problem to be resolved. Most of the individuals who will be given testimony right now own their own grassroots organizations and are not funded by the RORC at all or any other budget. What we're looking to do is to make sure that the ORC has an opportunity to be a transitional place, much like the gentleman from DC had said. If everyone who's coming back to Boston goes through the Office of Returning Citizens, and the Office of Returning Citizens know that Yard Time Entertainment, knows that Crossroads, knows that PAC, knows that we're the ones that's on the ground, you can pick up, you call me today, you're going into a house. Today. And if they don't go into the house, then that means that my child, your child, and everybody else's child is in jeopardy, because if they got released without an ID, they can't even cash their check. They can't even get any food. And it leads them back to a place of desperation. So I beg you, please, if nothing else, the $1.9 million that the mayor committed to, I know that you have an opportunity to at least start us right there. But that $1.9 million was a direct relation to the DC model, and that's why we was given it, and you've seen what they were able to do. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much, Jamal, and thank you. Thank you also for sticking to time. I appreciate that. So next, we're going to have Denise.
Thank you. So I'm not a professional speaker like my colleague here.
It's all good.
So I kind of prepared a little something. Although I want to speak to some things, I'll stick to my script for now, okay? Thank you. So my name is Darnice Watson, and I am honored to have these few minutes to speak to the budget allocated to restructure the Mayor's Office of Returning Citizens. This budget should include direct access and funding for resources that are needed to close the gaps in the system and to build a bridge over the barriers one faces when trying to access the necessary supports and services that are needed for a successful reintegration. I know what it feels like to fall through the gaps of services and to deal with the barriers, along with the shame of telling my story over and over again just to be placed on yet another wait list or sent to a different department. I understood then, and even more now, why we need and still need to revise and rebuild this system. But not just any system, and not just any set of services. The services that are led by the folks who are closest to the pain, the by us, for us services. The community closest to the pain should be provided the access and the tools to assist with this solution. As someone who knows pain, impacted by trauma, and witnessing violence at a young age, experienced teenage pregnancy, the loss of many friends and family members, I was a young mother who was involved with the justice and served my first time at the age of 19, which means my needs as a returning citizen weren't cookie cut. I had unaddressed grief, anger, I was a single mother, and overall, let's just say, arrested development. There was no one door that could understand where to begin with me. Times still have not changed, but we have an opportunity to make change. From age 19 to I was 28, I was in and out of courthouses, summoned to multiple interventions that stemmed from incarceration to probation, parole fees, probation fees, fines, and maybe parenting groups. Not once did anyone assess my mental health or even determine if this was a risk factor. The role the ORC can play in making a difference in lives of returning citizens is huge. Just by having access to resources for more mental health and psychoeducation supports to address the risk factors that lead to incarceration. Resources for vocational education, workforce development. These are tools that provide a road for sustainability and create the resources we need to be successful. One of my biggest intentions when I did return and go back to school was to be part of the solution, to be the person that I needed when I wasn't even sure what I needed because no one asked. No one even assessed why I was coming in and out of these same doors with the same issues. In my work today as a psychotherapist, I practice from the lens of solution. I'm a licensed mental health counselor, the founder of Crossroad Counseling Services, and my practice is grounded on being the intersection where the community with the greatest need meets the community prepared to service them. Alongside other culturally competent wellness practitioners with combined lived and professional experience, I am committed to the advancement of Black and Indigenous people of color who are oppressed by the systems that were designed to keep us a step away and $1 short from reaching our fullest potential. Crossroad and other grassroots organizations understand this assignment, focusing on primarily the populations of those living with mental illness and substance abuse issues, many which do not have access to community-based treatment and often cannot successfully complete vocational training or job skills training without structured supports that address the issues we live with mental health and substance abuse. This is the population that is more likely to reoffend and become subjected to rearrest because of illness-related offenses and past trauma that has gone untreated. What I want you to take away from what I'm saying, as we're thinking about restructuring the office, I want you to picture moms, dads, grandmothers, grandfathers, our sons, our daughters, and the people that make up our family. Our community is made up of returning citizens and their families. It is not primarily up to the ORC to reacclimate our family members back into the community. It's a collective effort and can be done by amplifying and mobilizing a reentry ecosystem. The $1.9 million, that would include grants to amplify the reentry services and treatment delivered in the community, which is one of the most cost-effective ways to prevent such crimes. This would also save us taxpayers a lot of money, right? We're incarcerating someone, that costs. Treating their families on the back end when we talk about generational trauma, which again is another hearing, right? That costs. The ORC can be positioned to disperse grants and contracts to community-based and grassroots organizations to provide services, the services that we know do not exist and cannot be housed in the ORC, the services that I believe Robert and Rupert and Rufus spoke to, we fall through the cracks, right? Like, we're talking about mental health, we're talking about substance abuse supports. If we're going to address and combat the recidivism rate, we have to start with the reason why folks are going in and out of prisons. It's unaddressed mental health, unaddressed substance abuse. And we cannot rely on the wait list, right? We cannot rely on the referrals. We send a referral to Whittier Street, not to call out names, but we're referring folks to these systems that Leslie Credo also mentioned are getting funded year after year after year, but these services do not reach our community. I know this firsthand because before I was doing the work, I was the work. I was the reason why the work needed to be amplified, mobilized, why we needed to talk about revamping an ecosystem that not just talked about reentry as a whole, but this is no cookie cut. You have young women, you have young men. We're now talking about servicing the youth. Okay, if we went from 300,000 to 1.28, and now we're including youth, and we're not talking about homeless, or, housing, or combating substance abuse and mental health, then we're still not even there. We're still not even there. I don't want to sound ungrateful about where we are with this 1.28, because I see how we could get there. But I want us to look further than that. The question was asked, what programs are working? There's not one program that can work. When we look at reentry, I want us to adopt the model that we take when we look at homelessness, when we look at what we did down on Methadone Mile. We all said, hold on, this is not good for us. This is not good for our children. How can we get this and take this and move this somewhere else? Let's come together collectively like we did around that, like we do around medical and health care for elderly. Reentry deserves that same exact attention. Wraparound services, we need funding to support a hub. I'm gonna go off script a little bit because a lot of us who've spoken to me have heard me talk about a reentry hub like we have in healthcare, like we have in substance abuse. We all need to be underneath an umbrella where we're having these conversations so the Darnieces don't have to go through this door and that door and tell her story over and over again, to be shamed and not be serviced. So there's so much that needs to happen from 1.28 to 1.9 that this is just the beginning. So I appreciate this time and thank you. Thank you, you guys. Thank you, Rosie. Thank you.
Thank you for everything you do and for bringing your full self to City Council today. Appreciate it. Next, we have Joseph Bennett from Yard Time Entertainment.
Hello, how you doing?
Sorry. Yeah.
Okay. I was gonna start with the notion of that was written, but I'm gonna give you my personal story. So the reason why mental health affects me is because, you know, there was trauma in 1989 that was done to me and my family, so it was never addressed, and it only continued up until, you know, April 23rd, 1998, when I was sentenced to life in prison for a murder I didn't commit. I didn't get freed until April 30th, 2019. I had no date, so I had no reason to believe that I was coming back out here. But I knew I had a chance to come back out here, and I knew once I walked out, there would be people helping me. That's what I thought. When I got out, there was no help. I called the Office of Returning Citizens. They couldn't help. They didn't have it. He did offer me a Charlie card, though. I refused it, you know. But in the process of knowing what was going on, I decided to start Yard Time. You know, Yard Time Entertainment, Inc. It's not an entertainment company. We're a nonprofit organization that focuses on returning citizens. Like I said, I am one. So I knew what needed to be done. And one of my main focuses, a mental health group. You know, I deal with some of the most known ex-gang members that probably out of the business now, and out of my generation. This brother comes to my meetings also, you know, and they're all returning citizens, and they're all having the same problems. Some of them are just walking out of the jails. You know, my whole motto is like, if I can help you, I'm gonna help you. If I know someone that can help you, I'm gonna steer you to that person. But if we don't have the help, how are we supposed to help these people? I am the grassroots. I am on the streets. I am going places where some of these people can't go. I'm in neighborhoods where some of these people can't go. I deal with some of the people that people are scared to deal with. I sit in front of them. I sit at the meetings with them. You know, and if we don't get these grants for these grassroots organizations to help the ORC, they can't do it all. They can't do it all. You know, we're out there doing the work. The money needs to happen. It needs to come. I just wanted to share that.
Thank you. Again, I appreciate all of you for coming and sharing. I really do. Next up is Chris Conway for Out for Good.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Council Worrell and Madam Chair Council. My name is Christopher Conway, and I'm the founder of Out for Good Behavioral Health Services. We are a substance abuse recidivism intervention program servicing identified individuals that struggle with substance abuse and returning citizens. We also provide co-resealing amongst other services. I was invited here by GBIO, but I also speak for some of the voiceless still stuck behind the wall that are coming home soon. As a result of my own experience of being incarcerated and finding the lack of readily services upon my release, it became a passionate factor for me to become a part of a needed change, which started my organization, Out for Good. I returned to school, obtained the necessary credentials, and started the organization out of the passion that when people come home from incarceration, they need the services. I myself came home and couldn't find those services. I remember being released from Shirley Medium in 2001 with a plastic bag. They gave me a check and sent me on my way. I was left to find the services that I needed on my own. I saw a huge need for these ranging services in Massachusetts. In addition to obtaining the necessary credentials, I used myself and others as a model for my recidivism intervention program. This was achieved by asking myself and others with common experiences what services would be needed to remain out for good. Sometimes it only takes just giving that person an opportunity, which someone gave me. I walked into an organization getting out of jail, but I was in school. I was going to Cambridge College for my substance abuse license. And an organization gave me an opportunity, and that organization was Pyramid Builders Counseling Services. They gave me an opportunity to put my life back on track. But I really believe that reentry services start inside the judicial system, inside these jails, prisons. I believe that a person should be afforded the opportunity inside a Department of Corrections or a place like South Bay to get their life back on track. That's what started with me. My last incarceration was at South Bay, and they had a program in there. It was called 121, and 121 was a reentry program that helped people learn computer skills, resume skills, things along that line to help them when they got out. I believe that's where the seed was planted for my organization. I noticed in my quest for change as a returning citizen, the first thing I needed to address, first and foremost, was my mental health and substance abuse. Because, you know, we can give these returning citizens all these opportunities and jobs and things like that, housing, but if they don't have their mental health addressed or their substance abuse issues addressed, then the housing that we give them only going to turn into trap houses. And the jobs that we're going to give them, they're not going to be able to hold them because their mental health or their substance abuse issues haven't been addressed. As I started to search for these services, 2 words kept coming up: waiting list. Now, counselors, these 2 words can mean life or death for someone coming home. Like myself, there are returning citizens getting out of prison or jail that have a great desire and willingness to do the necessary work to become productive members of society. It's my belief that proper services should be readily available for returning citizens. It's also my belief that this population of men and women deserve a second chance, and services that will support them in becoming productive members of our society. Therefore, I ask that you consider keeping the 1.9 mil in the budget so that we can provide the quality and effective service to a population that have been one of the most underserviced when it comes to human services in Massachusetts. Again, I thank you for the opportunity for allowing me to speak on this matter, which has everything to do with our public safety in the greater Boston area. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chris. Really appreciate your testimony. Last we'll have Donnell Wright.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Donnell Wright, and I am a returning citizen. I am also a member of GBIO. I am also the CEO of the Intervision Empowerment and Consulting Center in Western Massachusetts. I drove here from Springfield, Massachusetts this morning to be a part of this event. Why? Because it's important to me that people understand the reality of what's going on and why we need that $1.9 million, right? The thing about it is that I'm a former homeless person. I'm a former heroin addict. I'm a former crack cocaine addict. I'm a former gangbanger and convicted felon. But today I work for the state of Massachusetts as a social worker. And I have my own nonprofit organization. Why? Because I knew the importance of giving back to our communities. I know how important it is for individuals who have lived the type of life that I've lived and survived, because it's only by the grace of God that I'm still here, and my mama. I understand the importance of giving back to the young people who are hopeless, because I know what it feels like to be hopeless, when nobody believes in you, when nobody was willing to give you a chance. Counselor, I was one of those individuals who did my time when the Honorable Judge Factow sentenced me on my birthday in 2006. He told me, Mr. Wright, I want you to go into that prison. I want you to do your time, and I want you to be a light to those who are still in the darkness, and come out and be an asset to your community. Well, I did everything the judge instructed me to do. I went into that prison. I turned my life around. I became a leader and an example for other inmates. I started and ran programs inviting clergy and other members from the Boston political establishment, and they came into the prison by me and my cohorts writing them letters, and they talked to the inmates about personal and social responsibility. When I got out of prison after doing my 7 years, I also was disillusioned about the help that would be available. I thought I would get help when I got out. I thought wrong, because when I left my incarceration, I didn't have an ID, and I didn't have a driver's license. Why? Because I owed all those fees that you mentioned earlier. I owed victim witness fee. I owed license reinstatement fee. I owed so many fees, but I didn't have the money. So when I got out, I needed a job because I was on parole and probation. They also wanted money. They wanted probation fees. They wanted parole fees. So that meant I had to get a job. How am I going to get a job? I don't have an ID. How am I going to get an ID? I don't have the money to get a job. So I found myself caught in these catch-22s, but yet, here I am, an individual, graduate with honors from Boston University, have a real estate license, have a Class B commercial truck driver's license. I'm certified in environmental health and safety, asbestos removal, contracting, but I couldn't get a job. When I finally landed a job with Stericycle, they hired me, $60,000 a year with a start date. They were going to fly me out to Langley, I believe it was in Texas, then out to Atlanta, Georgia for training. 3 weeks, I started going to a trucking school. They sent me to trucking school. They paid for everything. 3 weeks later, I got a phone call when I was getting ready to graduate. Mr. Wright, sorry to inform you, your query came back. We are reneging our offer of employment. And they let me go. That's when I met Beverly Williams, who introduced me to GBIO. And they heard about me because I became a public motivational speaker, going around telling people, telling my story, that I was trying everything. I did everything they asked me to do, but I can't get a job. So I told everybody, instead of hiding from the things that I've done, I took full responsibility. I started letting people know the difficulties and the challenges I was having, trying to reintegrate back into society. No one cared. And society thought it was me. It wasn't me. It's our society that's the problem. It's the system that's the problem. It's not the individual all the time, because I know individuals that get out and they try, and they try, and they fail, because the system is set up for you to fail. Right? So when I was introduced to GBIO, they asked me to come to Boston to speak on Charlie Governor Baker's inauguration. And here I am, Mr. Convicted Felon, on the stage with the governor of Massachusetts, former mayor Marty Walsh, and the lieutenant governor. And after I spoke and I held up all these degrees and these licenses, and I said, you know what I don't have though? A job. Everyone in the audience, they looked at each other and said, what's really going on here? And that's when Charlie Baker stood up, him and Mayor Marty Walsh, and he said, we're gonna give you a job today, Mr. Wright. And they did. They gave me a job working for the state, and that was 8 years ago, and I'm still in that job today. We do recover, and we do change. But you can't get something out of nothing. Some of us need that investment. Yes, there are gonna be failures. Yes, there are gonna be people who are not gonna do the right thing. Those are the ones that you're gonna see in the news. You're not gonna see the success stories like me, unless we create our own avenue. We create our own media to let people know there are people out here who have been to prison. They are in prominent positions. We have started our own businesses. Some of us work for state and local government, and we have not recidivated. But you don't hear those stories. We're here to tell you that there are organizations out here like mine, like many of these individuals out here all across this state. And we're willing to unify and work synergistically, because that's what it takes. No one organization can solve these problems. The Office of Returning Citizens, we need that $1.9 million, and we need at least $600,000 of it to go to community grants. Why? For them, the Office of Returning Citizens, to do those assessments, so you can assess where a person is at mentally, physically, spiritually, economically. And then they can, in turn, send and recommend these individuals to the organizations that are best able and suited to help them. That's how you effectively use money. We want to use this money effectively, not waste it. We know how to do that. We know how to reach these individuals. So I'm asking you here today to understand that the community grants are for community organizations to make sure that these individuals are followed up on with their needs, to make sure that those assessments are being followed through, and that that money is not wasted, because not one organization can do it all. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Donnell. And thank you to the entire panel. I've done some talking, so I'm not gonna ask my questions, but I wanted to see if any of my council colleagues had any questions or statements they wanted to make. Starting with you, Councilor Ora.
First and foremost, this is probably my first term on the council, one of the most powerful panels I have seen here at City Hall. So thank you all for sharing, for all the great work that you are doing and continue to do in our neighborhoods. Because it's not just a dollar amount, as I can't remember who said it, but it's about people, right? It's about people, and then it's also about the health of our community at the end of the day. So I'm supportive, and I understand the importance of having the grassroots organizations doing the work, because it's those who have lived through it that can connect to those people in those circumstances. So thank you again, and I appreciate you guys all sharing and continue doing the work that you guys do, and I'm being supportive of this initiative.
Thank you. President Flynn?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I just want to echo what my colleague, Councilor Worrell, mentioned in his comments, but this was an informative hearing panel, and it really said to us that everybody deserves a second, a third chance, our returning citizens, if we're serious about providing assistance and providing hope and opportunity for returning citizens. Well, it costs money, and $1.9 million doesn't seem like it's a lot of money, in my opinion. It seems reasonable to me. So I certainly stand here with my colleagues in support of that $1.9 million figure for Office of Returning Citizens. And I've referenced in my comments earlier the city of Washington, D.C., a population similar to Boston, has 13 full-time staff on their returning citizen office. I don't know what the budget is, but we have to give our returning citizens an opportunity to come back into society and to engage in society. They want the same thing that we want, is a good job, good health care, and try to be a productive member of society and reestablish relationships with their family and community. What is the figure? 99% of returning citizens come back to the neighborhood that they were born and raised in. So do we want returning citizens coming back to the neighborhood they were born in without any services or education or training, assistance? Or do we want returning citizens coming back to our neighborhood with skills, with life skills, with the ability to get a job, to get training, to get an apartment, to establish relationships with their family, their kids? So I just want to say thank you to the panelists for their story, because it was very helpful as we discussed the budget. So it was important to listen to you, but I just want to say thank you to my colleagues for bringing this forward, Madam Chair and Councilor Worrell. And again, I agree with Councilor Worrell. This is probably the best panel I've been on as well, Councilor Worrell, for a number of years. So just want to say thank you for both of you for the important leadership you guys are providing. Thank you.
Thank you, President Flynn. Councilor Fernandez Anderson, did you want to have any questions or want to make any comments?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for holding this hearing, and to my Councilor Brian Worrell as well. Of course, this is extremely important and impact us all in our communities. I think, when you think about issues with incarceration or thereafter returning citizens, I think it's one that is stigmatized, obviously, to your points today, that is stigmatized to a degree where unless it affects you, unless it hits your back door, then you're not interested. So I never speak about my personal life and how this impacts me, but I think today in this chamber it's totally appropriate. I am married to a man who is currently incarcerated and who was wrongfully convicted and has served a couple of decades in prison. And so the reason why I think, while listening to you, all of what you were saying was resonating with me naturally. But I think that I was more focused on looking at the budget to what was offered, looking at numbers to the past years, and really 1.9 million is a joke. And I would say that the fact that we are not thinking about in the millions of dollars to be invested in an issue such as this is due to the stigma, but also to the systemic racism that currently exists and how it perpetuates further issues in our society to further dampen or cripple our people. Because let's be honest, like the heroin epidemic, when it began to affect our counterparts, our white counterparts, then the issue became more sensitive. Then we talked about harm reduction. We began to look at implementation of wraparound services in a different way. And to my brother Chris on the panel, brother Joseph, that I know all too well. We used to work together in behavioral health field. You can attest to this, and you know that there aren't enough supports, and wraparound, as we know it, is not actually implemented. And to the sister that was speaking, you're absolutely correct. Wraparound services in these rinky-dink clinics in our community don't actually reach us. And they don't, they're ineffective. There are lack of an ecosystem to consolidate these services in a way that's actually impactful. And not to say that they're not effective in all things that they do, but specifically to this issue, to mental health in our communities. I keep saying the insurance companies and in terms of CBHI services, ineffective, because we also know that we need a medical necessity, therefore diagnosing our children, creating a prison pipeline so that we can further incarcerate our children later on. We also know that, again, systemically, Black people are not supported, and particularly, and there are categories to this, and people hate hearing it, but it's true, in particularly the African American men, then woman, then you can go up, so then Black immigrant, then you can, and it's like this huge ladder. And Dr. Frances Cress Welsing talked about this in the 70s and 80s, and here we are again. And the post-traumatic slave disorder that we suffer, the vicarious trauma that Black women suffer, and how it perpetuates all of these further social determinants of health that keeps this vicious, poisonous, cyclical effect on our people. So I have much to say about it. Of course, I am in support of you. I have to say, in the way that they have commoditized our Black bodies and continue to create and propagate further ways to capitalize on our Black bodies is despicable, it's disgusting. And if we are to be transformative in our policies, in our ways of running this government, then we should do something different. We shouldn't be the same. We shouldn't continue to repeat these patterns that deeply harm us. So it's a very lonely place for my council colleagues to stand in, and you see here our president, Council Flynn, is always in support, always on our side, and I appreciate you for that. It's a very lonely place to be in, but politics in itself is entering the lion's den, and it's a very transactional culture. And so we are doing our best to figure out how to bring these issues in the chamber while we give you our thank yous. But what we're not telling you is that we feel your pain, we hear you, and we're working for you and on your side. We look forward to further collaborate. But we need your support when that budget hearing comes up. We need you to speak up. We need the advocates to go to every single counselor, irrespective of their demographics, and push them and say, we understand this may not benefit your leverage to advance your political agenda or resume, but we really need you to vote this way. And irrespective of how depraved Black people have become in Boston, in racist Boston, we need to be able to be brave and fight and keep pushing forward. I appreciate you accommodating my ranting, but obviously this is from the heart. I love you, and we look forward to fighting with you.
Thank you, Councilor Fernandez Anderson. I'm glad we were able to make the hearing. So I don't even know if I have anything I need to say after that. I just, just to contextualize some of the work that we want to do and to continue to push this issue, which is a hard issue to get folks to buy in and think about and see like why it's important. Well, our residents are important. Our job, the folks who are elected, the folks you see here, is to think about those who are too easy to forget, who we want to forget, and we don't want to see our own sins reflected in other people's trauma. And so our work is to do that. And so I'm excited about the conversations we're going to continue to have around IDs with the Department of Corrections, right? That's outside of my jurisdiction, but I am happy to step out, right? Like, don't confine me to just a city. We have work to do I look at what is the problem, what is the solution, and what's gonna get us there. I don't look if it's just in city. So I look forward to that conversation. We already talked about housing and the investments in the work that we're gonna be doing with Justice for Housing, with Boston Housing Authority, to really, because that's outside of this budget. That's outside of what we're talking about here. Because housing, we're talking about millions of dollars that need to be invested to make sure that housing as a human right is secured for everybody, right? That there is no, we don't assign any sort of moral value as to who does and doesn't deserve housing. And so the other conversation that we'll have is around mental health and about what that looks like to connect the ORC with the work that, I had initial conversations with, and unfortunate that other members of the administration couldn't be here today, but Boston Public Health Authority, Boston Public Health Commission, very much interested in integrating services. And I was like, hold up, there are community groups that are out there that are already doing the work. So we gotta talk about what the model looks like, right? We don't need to reinvent wheels, we just need to make systems work and to bring that synergy. So I thank you all for being here. I guess if I had one question, and I'm not gonna, there's still folks waiting to testify and we're running late, but just what would that synergy look like to you for folks returning home in terms of accessing mental health between, grassroots organizations, ORC, Boston Public Health Commission, what would that look like?
You wanna take a shot at it? So if I'm understanding your question, it would look like creating a system, like a hub, right? I think I talked to you about this. Creating a hub where the Boston Public Health Commission, the ORC, grassroots organizations, workforce development, other departments that need to have a hand in this. We're in conversation. We're having wraparound conversations. So individuals aren't going through 9 different doors just to get one thing done. So this would look like creating this reentry task force hub that I've been talking about and working on for the last couple of months that would bring the community that's closest to this matter together. So that's where we would start. And it would take funding to do so, right? In conversations around building bridges, really. And we can have another conversation about this, of course.
Just to add something, like that hub she's talking about, like when someone calls me and I can't do substance abuse, I quickly call Chris and I refer them to Chris. Darnice was my clinician, talk clinician. So I had her as my talk clinician when I came home, and it was just because I trust her. And that's the thing, it's built on trust. When these guys are coming home, they're not talking to no one inside the prison, and they dang sure ain't going to come back out here and start talking to someone that don't know them, and they don't know that person. So when I create that mental health group, we always in jail. When we sat in the group, it was for 2.5 days good time. This ain't for good time, this is for the rest of our lives. This is to get our life in order, because they are struggling when they come home to adapt. The world is moving so fast that they'd rather go back to jail. Some of them are doing 30 years and lasting 60 days out here and going back to jail because they cannot adapt.
Well, I want to thank the panel. Thank you so much. You're free to stay at your seats while we hear public testimony. We have folks both in person and on Zoom, so just give us 1 minute as we transition to that. So thank you. In person first.
Great. Yeah, of course.
All right, just so that we can, I've held the staff here, and thank you so much to Ron for being here and for all your work. We have a list of folks who are signed up to testify. So can you raise your hand if you're here to testify? Great, and can I have, we can have one at each mic for now. So we can start with Andrea James.
Hi, good afternoon.
I just want from Justice for Families as Healing. So I just wanted to give you your proper intro.
Thank you, Councilwoman, and thank you for this opportunity. Thank you for this very important hearing. I'll be brief. I've sat here from the beginning of the hearing until now, and I want to say thank you all, and thank you to all the city councilors, including my own, City Councilwoman Anderson, for staying in here, and Councilman Flynn. Want to also uplift Leslie Credo, want to uplift Donnice Watson, who are women, like myself, who are formerly incarcerated. Women go to prison also. The majority of us are the primary caretakers of our children prior to us being incarcerated in cages. And when we come home, one of the first things we do is ask, where are our children and how are we going to find them? Housing has been a big issue. We can't get our children back in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts without appropriate housing. So this is really a significant issue for us. I want to just lift up, the title. We've heard a lot about the Office of Returning Citizens. I had the privilege in 2013, I've been around a long time doing this work, in introducing then Conan Harris, who was the Deputy Mayor of Public Safety at the time, to Mr. Charles Thornton, who was the founder of the Office of Returning Citizens in Washington, D.C., the first legislatively enacted body of his successor you heard from today. And we continue to work with these offices of returning citizens around the country to figure out, at Families for Justice as Healing here in Roxbury, where we do our work, and the National Council for Incarcerated and Formerly Incarcerated Women and Girls, how to bring significant and meaningful transformative change to the city of Boston. I want to just mention the name of this hearing, as you know, is an order for a hearing on the civil rights and liberties of returning citizens and re-entry into their Boston communities. It does not say to raise a budget just for the Office of Returning Citizens, although I am happy that there is an increase being contemplated for that body. I also want to, though, emphasize what this entire body of formerly incarcerated people have said, that more needs to happen in terms of flexible budgeting. We were on the ground door knocking to make sure that our residents in District 7, the lowest funded historically district in the city of Boston, that also is the corridor of the most incarcerated corridor in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. We have just lost 3 young black men to gun violence last week alone. And other than the gang unit, we don't even have a community center in that corridor to meet with our youth. And so I just want to say this, because what we know for sure, and I'll wrap in 2 minutes, I want to just get us out of the mindset of the level of austerity that this city has subjected black people to for generations, and mayors after mayors after mayors, the level of racism and austerity in our communities and care for our people that our councilwoman has just cited to. The racism, intentional, because as Councilman Flynn noted, the reflection of the city's priorities is its budget. And I will close with this. Very important. We have to get ourselves out of this mindset of austerity in investment. The overall total police budget in the city of Boston is $395 million, of which there's a section of that budget which includes special events management, emergency preparedness. Also assigned to this program are the Neighborhood Crime Watch program, Officer Friendly program, senior service officers, and the Paid Details Assignment Unit. This also includes the gang unit that we are fighting to remove from our communities. No longer shall we only allow a gang unit to be the response to the needs of our children. That budget is $190 million. So respectfully, thank you for this opportunity to have this first hearing. We have a long way to go. $190 million reflects the priority of the city of Boston in the most incarcerated corridor made up of my community that I have lived in for 5 generations off of Humboldt Avenue, where we have just lost 3 young black men again last week. So this 1.9, 1.2, it's an outrage. We have to get a budget that is set to being able to be distributed equitably, not through the Office of Returning Citizens, through another community-led entity that can fairly and equitably distribute money, and we've got to be matched like a gang unit is matched in the hundreds of millions of dollars. That's what we deserve. So I thank you for this opportunity very much, and I do look forward. Families for Justice is Healing, we are an abolitionist organization, and sometimes we're not always invited to the table. I appreciate this opportunity, but we are working to end the incarceration of women and girls. Every single thing we do affects everybody else in our neighborhoods that all of these returning citizens you've heard from live in. We live there, and we have the answers. So please, fight for meaningful and significant funding that our people deserve. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Andrea. Appreciate all the work you do and the work that Families for Justice Healing is doing. This is just the beginning, and we'll be in this fight for the long haul. You see your city councilors, and we really care about this issue. Anyone else here in person for public testimony? Pastor Hobbs.
Thank you, counselors. This has been an outstanding hearing. I'm so humbled to be here and to be a part of this. And I just want to underscore that the 1.9 million, again, that's should be a no-brainer. I'd like to start with that. Right?
Yeah,
what was committed?
That's base.
That's base, right, okay. So, but beyond that, to have the conversation as you talked about with ways that we can really incentivize coalitions, because I think the way that the system is set up, as we said, was really competition as opposed to coalition. So grants and resources that will foster coalition and qualitative, documented outcomes that we can demonstrate. Research, right? Because we've got plenty of research, and what the grassroots organizations are doing with little resources. If that can be buttressed, we can see how much more that could do than these organizations that we talked about continue to get funded, that get big resources that are not yielding the outcomes that the smaller organizations are doing, grassroots organizations. And I want to really also reiterate partnerships with the faith community. I love that GBIO is here and the advocacy that they're doing, but I think with the faith community, as we talked about even heart transformation, as we talk about doing resources, again, with even coalitions around faith-based entities in partnership with all of these kinds of things, because again, we talk about wraparound, if there's not heart transformation, then we just get resources that's really not good. So I just want to thank you for this. I look forward to continued conversations because, again, a lot of us have been doing work. There's a state of emergency line item for $100,000 that I believe that is still intact. I hope so, that Healing Our Land advocated for years of a state of emergency healing and empowering movement, that these are the kinds of things that we're talking about. So we've got several different administrations that line item has not done what it was ever intended to do, that came through years of a quarterly community forum process via the underserved, inclusive of our returning citizens. So again, not reinventing the wheel. We've got a lot of organizations that are doing some great work, and I just look forward to the continuing conversations about how we can really have this aggressive, I call it a state of emergency healing and empowering movement that will have economic engines that can be sustained. Like, this should be seed money for economic engines that will sustain these, be self-sustaining, right? Like, I'm just quickly an example with the housing or the land stock that we have, to be able to use that land to have returning citizens trained with livable wages to participate in this building boom that's happening all across this city. And to be able to talk about restorative justice, to train them with the skill set to be able to make a livable wage, but also to build maybe a 5-star hotel in Dorchester, Roxbury, Mattapan, that they've got a block of rooms that returning citizens live, but they're being trained by seasoned veterans, like a vocational kind of a thing, that we can have a mechanism that they can come to. Literally, I talked to people who were incarcerated who were saying that they need something, there's nothing for them. So, again, much longer conversation, but I look forward to further conversations, and thank you for this hearing.
Thank you so much. Can you just state your name? Can you state your name for the record?
Oh, so sorry. Yeah, I'm Franklin Hobbs, Pastor Franklin Hobbs with Healing Our Land, also Global Ministries Christian Church and Boston Praise Radio and TV Network.
Thank you so much, Pastor Hobbs, for being here. We have some folks on Zoom. Just want to reiterate, so 2 minutes so that everyone can be heard. So we'll go to our first person on Zoom.
Good afternoon. My name is Jacqueline Scott, and I'm a grateful returning citizen. In fact, I'm a lucky returning citizen because of the abundance of support I was blessed with upon reentry from family, from friends, former employer of 29 years, the behavioral health for justice involved individuals reentry navigating team, the Catholic Charities aftercare program, and last but certainly not least, the Office of Returning Citizens, especially the reentry specialist that I was assigned when I called, who spoke earlier, Rupert Saunders. Being included in the Monday ORC advisory board meetings when I first returned from 3.5 years of incarceration made me feel welcomed into a vibrant, caring community. Now, others can speak about numbers and quote figures and facts and cite chapters and verse, but I can speak only from my heart. It is not rocket science to understand that returning citizens face real, intractable obstacles to obtaining affordable housing, meaningful living wage jobs, access to resources and services, and the most important of all, and the necessary state-issued IDs, as you've heard so many times. I saved the text of an email I excitedly sent one morning at 8:06 to the former ORC Advisory Board Chairman, Jim Carey. It was August 18th, 2020, a couple of months after I had been released on parole. I said, Jim, Saturday I signed a 12-month lease for a room in JP. Though it is not my forever place, it's a first step. I appreciate you sharing your story because it helped me believe there was a place for me. I wear a bracelet that I received when I first was able to return to Mass in person. And it reads in Latin and in English, begin again. It's a very personal and powerful phrase for me because that is just what is expected of all returning citizens. Yet without adequate resources, funding, and ORC staffing, how are we to begin again? You are severely handicapping the 3,000 returning citizens I understand are released to the Boston area annually without these funds. Counselors, do the math, and I implore you to do the right thing. Honor the budget extra 1.9 million commitment so that we can realistically have a shot to succeed at beginning again. It should not be a matter of luck. Thank you.
Thank you, Jacqueline. Just waiting to see if we have others on Zoom to testify. If not, we'll recess. Okay, all right. Oh, well. The next person for public testimony can start speaking if you're on the Zoom.
This is Bob. Can you hear me?
Yes, Bob, we can hear you. We have 2 minutes starting now.
Thank you. My name is Bob Mara. I'm 76 years old. I grew up in a prison town, so I have a lot of relatives working in prisons, still do. So I'm concerned about people who work in prisons too. I live in Hyde Park. I worked at Boston City Hospital for 23 years. For the last 25 years, I've been visiting 2 lifers in prison, friends of mine. And for the last 10 years, I've been doing reentry work for Cambridge Health Alliance. I do that now at the Bill Ricca Jail. I'm a reentry case manager. And I'm currently part of the Greater Boston Reentry Task Force, which includes Jamal and Leslie Creedle, Jamal Gooding. And we're going to have 2 reentry fairs, one in Brockton on Saturday and one in Boston and Dorchester next month, and a reentry summit in June. I want to say it's the most rewarding work I've ever done, and I've done a lot of rewarding work, working with Robert Turner included, and the people I just mentioned, Jamal and Leslie. Also the most frustrating for all the reasons that have been mentioned, because the funding is totally inadequate, and 1.9 million, which I'm certainly recommending, is also not adequate to meet the task, especially for housing, which I've learned is the far most important piece of this. I just want to mention models that are important. Models are crucial. Cambridge Works as a positive model for the last 20 years of hiring Cambridge residents coming out of jail and then helping them get other jobs, including at Spalding Hospital. One of the most important models we've learned about recently is in Virginia, where they have a statewide council of 9 reentry task force. We've talked to the ones in Norfolk, in Richmond, and in Northern Virginia last night, actually. They have budgets of in Northern Virginia, 1.8 million, 1.5 million in Richmond, serving a lot less people than the Boston reentry program. And they do pre and post services, and now they're starting to do pre-release services as well as post-release, and I think that's hugely important to have that connection. The other model I want to mention, and Robert Turner already mentioned it, but Turnaround Tuesday is an awesome reentry model in Baltimore. The CEO of Johns Hopkins Hospital, he retired and now is the chairman of the board of Turnaround Tuesday. They got hundreds of jobs in hospitals in Baltimore, got an award from President Obama for their good work in Baltimore. We want to get him up here and replicate what's going on there. And I also want to just mention one other model of transitional housing, which Jamal has also mentioned in doing, Thrive for Life. There's a Jesuit priest in New York. He wants to come to Boston and do what he's done in Milwaukee and in New York City. But he's created a transitional housing, got rich people to donate a lot of the money, rich Catholics in his case, and they donated enough housing to create rooms for 25 people in Harlem. And they have a program that has transitional housing for a year, free college education and jobs. And we're trying to get him up here and try and replicate that, learn more about it. I'll stop there. I think I've exceeded my 2 minutes. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Bob. I appreciate your testimony. Can we ask folks remaining in the Zoom to raise their Zoom hand so we can move you over if you're here to give testimony? So just raise, again, if you're in the Zoom, and you want to speak, just to raise your Zoom hand so we can move you over so that you can provide testimony. So we're at the end of our hearing here, and so just want to make sure we get everyone who wants to be heard, so that we can wrap it up. Sounds like we're all set. Well, I want to thank everyone who came out today for this beginning conversation on how to support our formerly incarcerated residents, Office of Returning Citizens, a robust beginning conversation that lasted 3 hours. You know, and it's just and we just barely even scratched the surface of the issues that we that we have when it comes to making sure we're showing up for folks who are experiencing and living with the trauma of being incarcerated and trying to get their basic needs met. And what are we if not folks who are trying to steward the city's resources to make sure that we're meeting people where they're at, and we are dealing with those policy harms rooted in racism that have really hurt our communities. So I just want to thank my fellow colleagues for being here, the administration, the panelists that we had, and everyone who's offered public testimony. So stay tuned, more to come. This meeting, hold up, I'm still new, so I got to make sure I adjourn in the way that I'm required to adjourn. What am I supposed to say? Yeah, I think that's all. Just this meeting is adjourned. We'll be doing more work on this issue, so stay tuned. Thank you.